I'm refreshing the YouTube page until I see us pop up.
You're live.
All right, we are live. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Key of Threes for another weekly stream. Happy to be here on a Saturday night with three of my guys here. We got TB, Run the NBA, and JELSON in the building. We got some good topics for y'all. Some stuff that we will definitely disagree on. I think it'll get a little bit heated in here. We might have some real colorful takes. I don't know, man, but we're gonna start this off with some bangers. Trust me, because we got some Hall of Fame debates. This is quickly becoming a classic segment of ours, and definitely a big thing we've been doing here on the channel this off season. And we're gonna start with one that I introduced to the guys just a day or two ago, and I think I have a set position on, but as I will be going last here, I'm gonna start off with Trill here. Steph, you gotta let me know, man. Kyrie Irving, number one overall pick, 2011. Had a good time with the Cavs, went to the Celtics, has been around Brooklyn, now in Dallas. Very storied career, very highlight heavy player, very popular player. But is he a Hall of Fame caliber player? Let me know.
I'm gonna be honest. I'd say no, and the reason why I will say no is because a guy like Chauncey Billups isn't quite in the Hall of Fame yet, and if you look past the Flash and the, I guess you could say modern day Allen Iverson that is Kyrie Irving, his career kind of sort of matches up with a guy like Chauncey Billups, and if Chauncey Billups isn't quite in yet, I don't see a guy like Kyrie. They have the same amount of all NBA teams. Kyrie does have two more All Star games and the Rookie of the Year, but Chauncey has a Finals MVP and two All Defensive Second Team selections to Kyrie zero. So I think it does even out in terms of that Finals MVP and those All Defensive selections. And being that Chauncey isn't in, I can't really quite give the nod to Kyrie. And with Kyrie, I might give him the nod if he played more and did more with regard to his college career, because as we know, it's the Basketball Hall of Fame, not the NBA Hall of Fame. But he didn't really do much in his college career either. Um, Another guard, Tim Hardaway, he's a guy who has two less All-Star games, but he has two more All-NBA selections, including a first team selection. He's not a Hall of Famer. Kevin Johnson, he's also a guy that could be considered with three All-Star selections, four All-NBA selections, and he's sixth all-time in terms of assists. He's not a Hall of Famer. So those guys right there are the same kind of category where I would put Kyrie. And being that they haven't made the Hall of Fame yet, I don't think Kyrie's quite there yet, unfortunately.
I'm going to counter that because I do believe Kyrie is going to end up in the Hall of Fame. And I get what you're saying because there is a lot of flash to Kyrie's game. It is a very highlight friendly game that does tend to make him a little bit more highly rated at times than he would be otherwise when you're talking about a legacy case. The biggest thing that I think will help him in his Hall of Fame case is the fact that he has that ring. He played very well in that final series and in the playoff run in general for the most part. He hit an iconic shot in that ring or in that getting that ring. And whether you can argue one shot shouldn't change a Hall of Fame case that much, I would agree, but it's probably going to leave some amount of an imprint. And he's forever going to be attached to LeBron, which, given how much gravity LeBron holds throughout the NBA as a whole, is also going to have its impact. The other thing when we talk about Kyrie and where he's at today, he's still only 31. He's still playing great basketball. And assuming that he can still stay healthy for a few more years, his resume is only going to continue to improve over the next few years. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a couple of more All-Star appearances, assuming that him and Luka and the Mavericks as a whole can be a little bit more successful over the next couple of years and can be high enough in the standings for him to get into those. So I think his resume is going to have a little bit more improvement yet. And quite frankly, even though he is a flashy player and he is the highlight reel guy, he has been a very good scorer and a very efficient scorer, especially for his position throughout the majority of his career. at a much higher efficiency than most guys ever are at his position. When they get to that type of productivity and that type of scoring level, to be flirting with the type of efficiency numbers he has been for the majority of his career, specifically through his prime, is just not that common. So that's another thing I consider for him. But the biggest thing, like I was talking to earlier with Gabe for a bit, that carries his berth in the Hall of Fame is the fact that he got that ring, was so good in that finals, and it's tied next to LeBron, which probably shouldn't help, but because it's LeBron, probably does give him a bit of an edge.
Yeah, I agree. I think that he is a Hall of Famer, but just barely. I think the fact that he did play with LeBron, as you were saying, is really going to put him over that edge of if their career or if his career ended today. I think him playing with LeBron is going to put him in the Hall of Fame because of the publicity that he got from playing with LeBron. LeBron's no doubt Hall of Famer, obviously. When you play with a guy of that caliber, I don't really discredit you for not having a Finals MVP because you were playing with arguably the best player of all time. And if you did get that Finals MVP, then even more credit to you, but he didn't. With that being said, his career isn't over yet, as Devin was saying. There's multiple seasons here. I say he's probably another at least 3 years of very good basketball, all-star level basketball. So if he ends his career with 11 all-star appearances, 3 All-NBA appearances, an all-star game MVP for whatever that's worth, I don't value that all too much. Rookie of the year. He's an NBA champion, as we all know, was very good in the finals, as Devin was saying. I just don't see any way he's not in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I think you all bring up really good points when it comes to why he should or why he shouldn't. I think for me, he's just a very interesting case because even at his peak, I feel like Kyrie was maybe top 15. I don't know if he was ever a top 10 player in the league. And to say like, oh, you're a Hall of Fame level player and to never be top 10, it's like, oh, like that's kind of weird. And that's why, I mean, you got to think about it like saying like all NBA is the top 15 players in the league is a scuffed argument because we know it's a lot more guard heavy, especially. But generally to say, you know, you've only made the All NBA team 3 times. I mean, top 6 at your position, like you would think you want to at least be on that list for an extended period of time. And that's something that he doesn't really have. But where it comes into play is kind of a big thing with Devin's argument. And it's that fact that it's the Hall of Fame. And while the stats may not all be there and all align, especially accolade-wise, he is such a famous player that his impact on the game, I think, is almost bigger than what his career numbers and accolades show. For me, I look around and when you just see people you know that want to play, who do they want to play like? They want to have Kyrie's handles. You know, a lot of people I know wear Kyrie's shoes. Like his impact on just regular non-NBA basketball players, it's huge. It's ginormous. And then just like that shot in the 2016 finals, I hate to say it, that's one of the biggest moments in the history of basketball. That's a Hall of Fame moment. And the fact that he was able to go to like 3 finals in a row as well. I know he got injured very quickly in the first one, but he basically was a part of some very high-level finals runs. It's just the fact that he wasn't that number one guy for really any of them. And his success as a number one guy was very limited. You see his days in Boston, they really underperformed. He was injured the first year there. And then since like outside of that, I mean, it was like just the early Cleveland days where they weren't really expected to do anything. So of course him as the number one guy didn't go very far, but that's not really something you hold against him. I think what happens in Dallas could almost make or break the case. And this might be a hot take because he's a pretty made man. But say he plays like 4 or 5 years in Dallas and they consistently underperform, people might begin to kind of lower the way they view Kyrie Irving. And I think that's something you guys aren't really talking about when you say, oh, he has more time left. Well, that could also raise him up. But there's also a chance where enough playoff underperformances could make you say, oh, like, is he really as good as we say? We know they kind of fell downhill as soon as he got there. Now, I think they'll be better now that he's there. But when talking about an active player, there is always that uncertainty of, oh, what happens next and what happens now? And you look at the long term and it's, oh, you know, he made 8 All-NBA games because he had really flashy handles and was very popular. But when it comes to just who's the actual best player in the league on the All-NBA teams, which I think we can all agree is more important, he was not that caliber level player for very long.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. I think the All-NBA selections to me is, I mean, him having 3 is like, whether we like it or not, and yes, he was a very good player for a long time. 3 All-NBA selections is still a lot of All-NBA selections, right? And especially for the Basketball Hall of Fame, Kyrie Irving, his impact in basketball, as you were saying, Gabe, is just so large that it's like, I don't want to say his impact is bigger than like an Allen Iverson, but it almost is. In the day of social media, with how it is today, like everybody wants to have the handles of Kyrie. People were saying that about Iverson before Kyrie was big, but we're seeing every social media headline, this guy has Kyrie handles. This guy dribbles like Kyrie. That's something that a lot of NBA players do not have on their side, and especially when talking about the Basketball Hall of Fame, publicity and popularity is a big portion of that.
I get that, but I don't think he's quite at the Allen Iverson level. That's one aspect where, yes, I do give you the fact that Kyrie's handle is generational. There are many people that wear his shoes to this day, and I'm sure there are many people that are going to wear his new shoe now that he's signed with Anta overseas. But with Allen Iverson, he not only did people want to do his crossover, but everyone wanted cornrows. Everyone wanted a shooting sleeve. Everyone wanted it. It was much. It was on a much larger scale with AI. So I don't want to go into that territory, but I understand Kyrie's impact, but in the grand scheme of things, I just think there's other players throughout history that they may have been better basketball players in their totality, and their resume might also be very close to Kyrie's, and they're not a Hall of Famer. So that's kind of what it comes down to for me, at least.
I also have another question for you guys that is very Kyrie specific and hard to compare, I think, specifically to other players. There's been players with controversy around them before, but especially recently, with how public the controversy around Kyrie has been, if that were to say continue, because right now you could say, oh, it's just like the flat earth stuff was just kind of stupid, but like more so like last season specifically was really more of a bigger deal. And then even throughout like all the COVID stuff, there was just the whole big thing with that. If there was, say, controversy to continue with Kyrie Irving, do you think that would affect his Hall of Fame chances at all?
Yeah.
I think it does, because ultimately at the end of the day, the people that select the Hall of Fame are the media members, and the media members are the main people saying that what Kyrie's been doing, it's antics and they're stupid, quote unquote, and ultimately that will hurt him. Unfortunately, I'm one of those people that I don't think that should hinder how you view him as a basketball player, because how his beliefs and things like that have nothing to do with basketball, so to speak. So when those two kind of collide, that's when it kind of makes the Hall of Fame lose some of its integrity. But I do think it does ultimately hurt him, unfortunately.
I mean, I think of it the same way that I was talking about the popularity aspect of things. He's so popular. His crossover is popular. His shoes are popular. But anything he does will get attention, and that could affect him in a negative light. So if he continues to, do controversial stuff, you see it in baseball a lot with people taking steroids or doing other controversial things, and they will not be in the Hall of Fame. And I think the NBA, or the Basketball Hall of Fame rather, will be no different.
Yeah, I think you guys all have good arguments, but I think now we can move to a guy that Kyrie has some history with. They played each other in the finals more than one time. And, we say Kyrie had the big shot in 2016 that really sealed the deal. Well, the next guy we're going to talk about, he was the finals MVP the year before. Andre Iguodala, another, I think, very polarizing case of is he a Hall of Famer, because there's that one big thing there, and it's that finals MVP trophy. I don't know if we've seen any finals MVPs not go into the Hall of Fame besides, Chauncey Billups, who was mentioned earlier. I don't think he's in. But let's start with you, Devin. Let's switch up the order a little bit. What's your take on Andre Iguodala's Hall of Fame case?
I do not have Andre Iguodala in the Hall of Fame. And like you say, the Finals MVP is the biggest thing that gives him the argument to be in the Hall of Fame. Outside of that, his pedigree is just not that of a Hall of Famer. Now, evidently, the team success is there. He's got the 4 rings. He's been a very good defender. He's got 2-time all defensive teams to represent that. But he's only a 1-time All-Star. His peak was never that of an all-star type performer. He's never averaged over 20 points per game throughout his career. He hasn't averaged over 10 points per game in now nearly a decade. And given he was good in Philadelphia and he had a decent year in Denver, but he's just never been that top-tier guy to me that shows he's a Hall of Famer. Now, given he's played very well as a very valuable role player in Golden State, the team's success is there evidently, but I don't have enough outside of that team success to give it to him. He's been a very good player, but to me is a Hall of Very Good who's boosted by that team success. And you can make the argument that that Finals MVP is also should have gone either to one of 2 other players. That's an argument for another day, but he was great in that Finals run, so I don't want to discredit him for that either way. But when I look at what I see outside of the team success, I just don't see a guy who was ever a Hall of Fame quality player. Great impact and a very valuable player on a lot of good title-winning teams, but not quite at that level as a guy who's a Hall of Famer. He's very good, but not quite there.
Yeah, I completely agree. Just the pedigree is not there. When you watch him, the eye test tells you he's a winning player, sure, but you watch him and you're like, he affects winning, but he's not a great player. And in my opinion, to make the Hall of Fame, you have to be a great player. One All-Star game is just not cutting it. And in my opinion, he's not even close to making the Hall of Fame. I mean, if he doesn't have that Finals MVP, we're not even like somebody will bring up Andre Iguodala in this conversation and they're going to die laughing because that is so stupid. And then he has that Finals MVP, and I don't think many people will bring this up in the future if he does make the Hall of Fame. I don't think people are going to be like, "Oh, he barely won that Finals MVP," or "He shouldn't have won the Finals MVP." I don't think people are going to say that. But think about it now, he probably shouldn't have won that Finals MVP, or if not, probably shouldn't have. There's a debate that he shouldn't have, and if that's the case, your Finals MVP is barely carrying you into this conversation, and then you're like, oh well, he probably shouldn't have been it. So then you look at one-time All-Star, 2-time all defensive. That's pretty cool, but not Hall of Fame worthy. On his career, 11 points per game. I understand that he wasn't an all-time level scorer, which is another reason he's not going to be in the Hall of Fame. He was a great defender at times, which is another reason that he could be in the Hall of Fame, but it wasn't consistent enough to be in the Hall of Fame, in my opinion. I just don't understand how Andre Iguodala could be anywhere close to the Hall of Fame.
You're going to hate me because I have him as a Hall of Famer. I have Iggy as a Hall of Famer. Listen, when we talk about some of the greatest dynasties, we're talking about the Warriors and his role in that closing lineup in one of the best dynasties ever. They're etched in history forever, and he's part of that. He was integral to that. His 2015 Finals performance, whether you want to debate it or not, you can also debate the fact that Iggy was one of the guys that helped to, I don't want to say stop LeBron because LeBron still did his thing, but slowed him down enough to where the Warriors were able to win. And this was before they had KD. And you can also debate the Finals MVP and that it could have gone to someone else. However, if it goes to Iggy, I can also say he won a Finals MVP over the greatest shooter ever. So that, to me, that also boosts his credibility with regard to that, because as you said before, it does show that he's a winner on paper. And to me, I think he was a pretty good player wherever he went. He was an all-star and it wasn't above 20 points per game, but it was near 20 points per game in Philly. He was the second best player on that underdog Denver team that won the 56 games back in 2013. And again, like I said, what he did in Golden State, it speaks for itself. And from 2010 to about 2018, and I may even argue about 2019, 2020. He was an all-time defender. He was playing very good defensively. Ended up becoming a very good high IQ passer, high IQ player, and even in their ring, in the chase for their ring in 2020 or 2021, excuse me, I think that he would have been more integral with. I don't want to say playing, but just being there and actually being active for this team, it would have done well for them. But regardless, he's left his imprint in history, just mainly being on a team that was a dynasty. That already in itself just it etches his own name in history, and I think that also carries weight into him being in Hall of Famer going forward.
I hear what you're saying. Like, there's no doubt he is etched in history with this group as a dynasty, and deservedly so, because after Curry, after Clay, after Draymond, he's the next name that comes up, and it should be the next name that comes up. He's deserved to be in that conversation. I just don't know if I can put a guy who's only ever been a role player within that dynasty as a guy who I can put in the Hall of Fame. I can say retire the number, give him a ton of credit, Finals MVP, very good player on some competitive teams earlier in his career when he was more of a borderline all-star guy, but I don't know if him having that success within that dynasty as a role player is enough for me to say he's a Hall of Famer. But great player, no doubt about it. I don't want to discredit what he meant to that dynasty, but I think he should be celebrated within the Warriors organization more than he should be celebrated in the Basketball Hall of Fame.
He's just such a winning player. I think when you look at his whole career, like, he was an all-star caliber player, and obviously a one-time all-star in the late Philly and the Denver days. And then he really bought into that role with Golden State. And that was one of the last pieces that really allowed them to start winning at the highest level. And so when people think of that dynasty, like Steph is saying, like, he's going to be one of those guys that you always think about, especially the first half of the dynasty, the pre-KD days. I mean, he won that Finals MVP when they got the job done. And then once KD got there, well, that wasn't a really deep team. So, I mean, when your star players wanted to take a breath, who was out there, getting the job done, keeping things afloat until those guys could get their breath back? It was Iguodala, man. And then even something none of you guys mentioned, he left Golden State for a little bit. And as soon as he left Golden State, the team he went to in Miami, they went to the finals. And so I'm not going to say that was all.
Wait.
I'm not going to.
Didn't Andre Iguodala literally hate everything about being in Miami?
No, he hated being in Memphis.
It was Memphis.
Memphis. But listen, he went there, and I'm not going to say that he was like the reason they made the finals, because that'd be a little bit outlandish. They had Haslam there. They had Coach Spo. Jimmy's a dog. But they had a championship pedigree like that, bro. I don't think it's any secret that he went to 5 straight finals with the Warriors and then went to a 6th straight finals going to Miami. 6 straight finals?
I can't buy into
that's a lot of winning, bro. But
I can't buy into being a role player that albeit is a winning player and knows how to win, but a role player on a team that we're considering a Hall of Fame level player their criteria should not be able to make team or keep team afloat. That should not be the criteria for Hall of Fame.
Hey, listen, bro, but he was a clutch performer in these finals as well. The classic clip that will live forever, I want Iguodala. Bro.
And there's a reason it was mean, bro.
He'd always come up big in the biggest moment.
It was mean, but it was funny because it ended up being true.
Yeah, because Curry Iguodala did. Am I wrong, Devin, Raptors fan? Who hit the game winner in Game 2 of that finals?
Don't remind me.
It was Iguodala, bro. And listen, I think his overall career stats could have looked better if he was not in Golden State, and he really did sacrifice a lot. But I think he's a player who his true impact isn't what the stats show, which is kind of fitting for another Warriors player because Draymond's kind of the same way. He just has more accolades.
I just can't buy into if he didn't go to Golden State, he would whatever have more accolades. When, in my opinion, he would like I just don't see how he might have had a couple more All-Star game appearances. I'll give you that. He might have been a 3 or 4 time All-Star. But then he doesn't have the Finals MVP. And then are you giving a 4-time All-Star a Hall of Fame nod? Probably not.
Here's the thing. Andre Iguodala. We were just talking about this with Kyrie Irving. It is the Hall of Fame. Andre Iguodala is a famous player, bro. Like
No,
everybody,
he's not.
bro. He literally the Hamptons Five.
No.
Hamptons Five?
Iguodala is a famous player in the NBA community.
Casuals who only watch the finals see Andre Iguodala every
Casuals,
year.
you go to most
Over
casuals
half
on the
a
street,
decade.
they are not going to tell you and know who Andre Iguodala is. I'm going to be honest. It's not the same level of impact as Kyrie had.
Bro, 'cause
It's not even close.
Casuals are bandwagon Warriors fans. Bro.
No,
they know Iguodala.
Dude, bandwagon.
That's a fact.
Bandwagon fans that are casuals don't take the time out of the day to learn the actual roster. They'll know the 3 players that are really good if they're truly a casual.
He's in the closing lineup.
If they are truly
literally
a casual,
he won a Finals
will know
MVP, bro.
Draymond-
What are
they
we
will
talking
know-
about?
They will know. So you think every casual NBA fan knows every single Finals MVP of all time?
I think
guarantee you not.
Warriors fans.
Casual
know the
Warriors
guy
fan
who
is
won
different.
The Finals MVP.
No, yeah. No, I was thinking more just casual fans. Period.
Casual fans in general are usually Warriors fans.
I don't think that's
They
necessarily
also
true.
watched the finals,
I don't think that's okay.
and they saw
Sure.
Andre Iguodala lift the trophy above his head.
Dude, my dad will watch basketball every once in a while with me. That doesn't mean he knows every single player, right? Or the value or the impact that they had on their specific team.
But he know Andre Iguodala, and that's why he's a Hall of
No,
Famer.
he doesn't.
Why are we arguing about what casuals know about a player?
Because he brought up the fact that the impact is the same as Kyrie Irving. When it's
I
not.
didn't say it was the same. I'm saying that how famous he is and
He's
how
not.
well
He's
known
not
he's
as
gonna
famous
be.
as Kyrie Irving.
Not as famous, but he is still famous.
Sure, okay, he's famous because of the I want Iguodala, the Finals MVP. Sure, but are we going to talk about? We were talking about Kyrie borderline making the Hall of Fame with his credentials, and now we're saying Andre Iguodala with his credentials.
One was on a dynasty, the other was on teams that either he won once, don't get me wrong, but then once he left, they couldn't win.
So
Then he goes to the Nets, no winning.
Dude,
Listen,
so
the
you're
Mavericks
trying
fall
to
at the
tell me
playoffs.
Andre Iguodala, he doesn't go to the Warriors, and he was on the Cavs instead. Okay, you trying to tell me that he would have anywhere close to accolades that Kyrie had?
I'm not doing what ifs with you. I'm going off of what happened, and what
We can do
happened
that
is
because-
Andre Iguodala was a part of a dynasty.
Okay,
An important
a
part.
role player on a dynasty. Kyrie Irving was the second best player on a finals winning team when Andre Iguodala throughout that whole season was
He
not
was
the second best
never
player.
the best player on a finals team. He was never the
Iguodala?
best player on a finals team.
Who, Iguodala?
Yeah.
He was not the best player on a finals team throughout the
How
whole
when
season.
he won a finals MVP? That doesn't even make sense.
Because the finals MVP only accumulates for the finals, the whole season.
So he
and
was the
playoffs.
best player
No,
for the finals.
for the finals, but not,
On the finals
not for the
team.
team. He was not the best player on the team.
Was he the best player on a finals team?
And no.
You
and
said
here's
no.
The thing. Here's the thing. I don't even think he was, but he won the finals MVP, so we'll
Therefore,
say that.
he was.
So, well, no, that's not how that works.
That's the best player in the finals.
No, if the media votes for a player, that does not automatically mean that they had the most impact on the series. We know this. We all know
every
this.
finals MVP is invalid.
No, that's not what I'm saying. But
They're all voted by the
we
media.
were literally all talking about this earlier. How that there's a genuine argument that he shouldn't have been finals MVP. So if we're gonna say he was the best player on the
Regardless
finals,
of if there's an argument or not, he won it.
okay,
He won it.
He was the best player for one series in the finals, and the rest of his
Something
career,
Kyrie wasn't.
he played with the best basketball player of all time.
Are you calling Stephen Curry the best basketball player of all time?
No. I'm saying Kyrie played with the best basketball player of all time.
But if he was talking about Steph Curry,
I thought you were.
respect it.
No. Kyrie played with the best basketball player of all time.
Hey,
Bro.
That's what I was talking about earlier.
I can see it either way, Justin. I just needed to rile you up, but I've seen we needed to get some energy flowing in this stream. We'll cut it off there because we're about 30 minutes in now. We're going to move on to our next player, and there's quite the theme in this video. This is the 2014 to 2018 Hall of Fame sweepstakes because, we are talking about who played with the greatest player of all time, and depending on what you think, this guy might have, but I think he has a little bit more credentials to show beforehand that might swing this in a little bit different of a direction. Jelson, I know you're energized right now, so we're going to start with you. And we're going to move to Kevin Love. And this is somebody that I feel like, I don't know, you are a bit of a youngin', so it might be a little before your time. But he was quite the stud in Minnesota before buying in to a role, being a third guy, taking a bit of a sacrifice and getting some winning done. And now is continuing to win even late on in Miami. So,
okay. Yeah, I first of all, I'm old enough to watch Kevin Love on the Timberwolves. Second of all, Kevin Love, to me, is one of those guys where it's very difficult. I mean, as a biased Timberwolves fan, I want to say clearly yes. But from a basketball fan, it's like, is it so clear that he's a Hall of Famer? And obviously not if we're having this conversation. I think that he's probably not a Hall of Famer. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer purely based off of the fact that, of course, he was a glue guy. And we can have this conversation about Andre Iguodala, about him being a glue guy. Kevin Love was the glue guy for that Cavaliers team. And in my opinion, Kevin Love has a much larger case to be in the Hall of Fame than Iguodala did. But I said what I said.
Hey, Steph, when it's your turn, you can
Kevin Love,
that.
throughout his career, had better accolades and was a better player through and through throughout his entire career. Did Iguodala have a top tier performance in one series? Sure. I will give you that. But he was not as good as Kevin Love was throughout his career. Kevin Love has 5 All-Star appearances. He's an NBA champion, as we talked about. 2-time All-NBA, All-Rookie, Most Improved Player. A guy that averaged about 17 in his career, about 10 rebounds, and was part of those days with LeBron and Kyrie where he was that guy that they were going to go to if they needed a big shot being knocked down. They were not hesitant to give the ball to K-Love if there was a shot that, whether or not Kyrie couldn't get an open look or LeBron wasn't going to get an open look, they were going to pass it to K-Love, and they trusted him to knock down a shot, play good defense, be a smart basketball player, all at a higher level than a lot of guys in the league at the time. I mean, the only guy that I can think of that was a bigger glue guy to any team in the league at that point was Draymond Green. So I think, to me, it's a very competitive case for Kevin Love to be in the Hall of Fame. With all that being said, I was just arguing like he was going to be in the Hall of Fame. It's just not quite enough for me personally. As a Timberwolves fan, I loved him, but five All-Star appearances isn't quite there for me. And the NBA championship, I mean, he won a championship or whatever, but it's just not quite enough for me.
Is it me?
I think so.
We'll go to you, Steph. I know you're dying to say something about that.
That's crazy. I don't know why you keep saying, oh, he was the best in one series. Yeah, the most important series of your damn life, bro. It's the most important series of your basketball career.
When he shouldn't have won it, but okay.
You can argue it if you want to. He won it. I don't care what he should or shouldn't have done. He did it. It's simple.
Okay, what I'll tell you right now. Okay, actually, let's not argue this because this isn't Iguodala anymore.
So with K-Love, now I will say I agree with you a lot on this K-Love argument in terms of I'm not sure if he quite makes it. You already named his NBA accolades, but I'm a bit older to remember a lot of this earlier stuff, because, again, it's the Basketball Hall of Fame, not NBA Hall of Fame. And he was a Pac-10 Player of the Year. He was a first-team All-American. He was a Gatorade Player of the Year in high school, and he is an Olympic gold medalist. So considering those other factors, that may give him the edge into the Hall of Fame. with regard to his regular career accolades and averages. Like JELSON said, I think that's what makes it borderline. But when you read the rest off, like I just did, I think that probably like gives him the edge just a tad, because those are other aspects that show he wasn't good just at one level. In high school, he was the best player in all of high school in terms of Gatorade standards. In the Pac-10 in his conference, he was the best player in his conference. He won at the highest level in the NBA, and he won at the highest level in the world with regard to the Olympics. So I think he might just get that boost into the Hall of Fame. I'm not gonna lie. Now, at first glance, I was like, I'm not so sure. But considering what he's done and what he's accomplished at every single level, I think he got it.
You
You
know,
think Kevin Love better than Kyrie?
no.
Better than Kyrie?
Well, you said Kyrie. You said no for Kyrie, right?
Yeah, I said no for Kyrie. And the
Did you
reason
say
I
yes?
have K-Love is because, remember I said with Kyrie, he didn't really do too much prior to. He did more of his damage in the NBA. K-Love, he has a full body of work from high school, college, NBA, Olympic. Like it's at every level when you see it. And again, even later on in his career now, he's still on a championship level team, and he's actually played very well for them in the minutes that he played.
You know, before we continue on to the next person, Steph, you kind of convinced me. I completely forgot that he had the gold medal. So that really does put him over the edge for me personally.
Yeah, I'm glad you did bring up the outside of the NBA stuff, Steph, because it is important for Kevin Love, as we've mentioned, is a guy who is probably going to be on the edge of whether he does end up getting put into the Hall of Fame or not. I do think he will, but like we've mentioned, it could go either way, and I wouldn't be shocked if he is a guy who ends up not making it. But the fact that his prime for a few years in Minnesota was as good as it was holds weight. The fact he's got the ring despite not playing great in that final series still does hold weight. And like you alluded to as well, Steph, after having some frustrations in Cleveland after everyone left and he signed that new contract, he's revitalized himself over the last few years, which of course not anywhere near his prime, doesn't hold anywhere near his weight as the ring, but it does show the fact that he's still continuing to play productive basketball into his mid-30s, and it does help him a little bit to continue to push that case. So I think he's going to be a guy that'll be on the fringe, but I do have Kevin Love making the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he's very fringe to say the least. His career is kind of a tale of two sides, I feel like. Just because for half of it, he was kind of the statistical monster without really winning much. And then, the second half, he really bought into winning, but his stats aren't really there like that. I mean, even on the championship run, like, he only averaged like 15 points per game. It's not like he was like this 20 points per game, like, super contributor. Now, to say like he was the clear third guy, but then he actually averaged more points on the 2018 roster that they said was a bunch of nobodies than the 2016 roster that won the title. So it's like, how good really was he when him giving you that exact same production is LeBron and a bunch of nobodies? For me, that's like, was he as good as we think he was, or is it just the fact that he played with LeBron? Because at the end of the day, like, even his all-star appearances in Cleveland, it's like he was the third all-star on the team. Did they get that because he was just that good? Were there other guys who were probably more deserving in the conference? You could probably make an argument for that. Now, did he get the accolade at the end of the day? Yes, he did. But, like I talked about earlier with Kyrie, it's like this thing with all-star appearances versus all-NBA. The forward positions weren't really that strong for the later half of Kevin Love's prime. You got to think the first half, okay, you still had like Dirk balling out, Tim Duncan. Later into his prime, he should have more than 2 all-NBA teams. To only be like, I once again go to like top 15 level. I don't even know if Kevin Love, he also was never a top 10 player. And I don't know if he was probably like top 20, maybe top 15 at his best. I mean, he wasn't even really a player that led a team to anything significant. Even Kyrie, who has never been a great number one guy, when he was the number one guy in Boston, like, they still racked up a lot of wins in the regular season and were a very good team. Kevin Love
he didn't play that much.
And but even still, like, bro, Kevin Love, even as a number 2, didn't really do that much. Like I said, once again, it was LeBron and a bunch of nobodies when Kevin Love was your number 2. It's like, what does that tell me? I don't know if he was that great. I think, like, I don't know. That thing, especially saying like Kevin Love has a better chance than Kyrie. Him doing more in college is cool, but like, what did Kyrie do before the NBA? Enough to become the number 1 pick in the draft. Like, let's not talk like he was a nobody.
I want to add that, dude. No, because he
played like 14 games in college, bro.
He didn't play a lot. That
draft was awful.
The draft was
bad. Maybe going into the draft.
Going into the draft, it was
in
bad.
In retrospect, calling the 2011 draft bad.
Well, going in the draft, he was bad. He barely played. He has no college accolades to hold for himself. Of course, he played for Duke, so it's a top tier program. So you're like, oh, is that gonna? I just don't see it because you can't say that like.
Clearly, he was a top high school player to get recruited to Duke.
Yeah, but every single number 1 overall pick, and all these guys are top high school recruits.
Bro, you guys were saying Kevin Love's Gatorade player. Okay, but
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying, but the point in that was the fact that every single level he's been successful.
I suppose that's true.
Kyrie, he played.
Yeah. If you say the winning aspect,
like 14 games at Duke.
If you want to talk about the winning aspect in college is definitely lacking for Kyrie. But as far as he's obviously a top high school player, to even have the benefit of the doubt to go number 1 without playing much college, and then even still, he also, I believe, has some Team USA success. I believe he was on there. So, I mean, he's also done stuff
going into this draft. It was poo-poo though.
Yeah, the fact that it ended up as good as it was with like him, Kawhi, Clay, like even Isaiah Thomas all the way down at 60, Jimmy Butler, they're like good draft class, but it took a while to get there.
Sure.
But
so do you have him?
To me, I don't think I would put him in there if it was the Gabe Hall of Fame. But the NBA Hall of Fame is going to say, oh, he won the ring with LeBron. And that, like kind of Devin's argument for Kyrie when he was like, yeah, that gravity of LeBron probably will help him out. That gravity of Kevin Love will probably put him in there. But I think you guys are making it a little bit more clear cut than it is.
I mean,
remember,
I going into this, I said he wasn't. So it's not clear cut.
So fast, bro.
No, it's not clear cut. It's not clear cut to me. But when he brings up the Olympic success, his college success, stuff I didn't even like. As Steph said, I'm younger than him, or I'm younger than all of you guys. So like that stuff I can't even like remember. You know what I mean? Because I was so young. So
if I'm not mistaken, they won a national championship with Russell Westbrook and Darren Collison, right?
That sounds right. Yeah,
I think so. If not, I do know for a fact they were one of the number 1 teams coming into the country.
College does him heavy because just off NBA, his NBA resume to me is not a Hall of Fame resume. It's just how iconic that 2016 finals was.
For sure. But I think that's where that distinction of basketball Hall of Fame versus NBA Hall of Fame, that's the reason he gets the nod. Like, it would be cool if there was an NBA Hall of Fame because then it would be a lot harder for a lot of guys to get into the NBA Hall of Fame, regardless of having a ring or not.
That's fair. All right. With that said, Kevin Love, it looks like 4 key at threes probably does make our Hall of Fame. But the next guy, we'll see because he was also a part of a championship team in the same era. Also, not as the best guy on the team, but a high-level contributor and a guy who especially the franchise will remember very fondly moving forward. And that is indeed Raptors legend Kyle Lowry. So I think we're back on Steph to start off.
Yeah, I think so. But I'm going to be honest. I have him a lot like Kyrie in a sense where they both have okay stats, but they their team is always playing at a high level with them there. Yes, don't get me wrong, and he does elevate his squad a lot, but I think he's a Hall of Famer. Don't get me wrong. I just don't think he's first ballot. That's what I should say. I don't want to say I don't think he's a Hall of Famer because I do think he will get into the Hall of Fame, especially because though there's a lot of players where you could say they're their team specific legend, like him being a Toronto legend. He's actually helped basketball be expanded internationally, quite literally, by playing in Toronto, and that helps the sport immensely in its own right. And when you talk about a player just growing the game itself, not even what he does as a player, but the actual game, it's so much bigger at that point. So I do think Kyle Lowry will get in. I just don't know if he's first ballot.
No, that's very fair because I don't think he's first ballot either, but I do think he eventually gets in. And I'm glad you mentioned the fact of his impact on Toronto, his impact on basketball in Canada, because of course Vince had his impact, of course Chris Bosh had his impact, but Kyle Lowry's amongst those of the greatest guys in Canada for really pushing the growth of basketball over Canada over the last 5, 10, 15 years. DeMar, of course, being the other biggest part of that as well. But Lowry's been that guy who just came in and embraced Toronto, gets the ring there, and that's a big part of his legacy. He also has a gold medal in the Olympics to his name as well, so that's worth mentioning. So when you consider, again, like statistically, out of all the guys we're talking about tonight, he might be the guy who stands out the least, but his impact on winning has always been there. He's always been a player who goes much further than beyond the stats in terms of his impact on the court. And when you consider the ring and you consider the impact that he had at times in that run and the impact he's had on Canadian basketball, I think he will eventually get in there. But like you say, it might take a bit of time. I definitely think he's far from a first ballot, but give him a bit of time. I think he'll find his way.
Yeah, I like Kyle Lowry a lot, and I like what you guys are saying. I don't think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer by any means, and it actually kind of feels like one of those guys that when we're talking about Hall of Fame inductees and the voting for Hall of Fame, I feel like there might be a chance that he almost gets left out, less because of his case and more because of just the fact that I feel like the media doesn't give him a lot of credit that he deserves. I feel like Kyle Lowry held it down in Toronto, and Devin and Gabe, you guys know that as fans. He held it down consistently. He never really complained about situations that he was in with DeMar when they were getting destroyed by LeBron at times or just unhealthy spurts. He always seemed to be, never too high, never too low. And then Kawhi comes in. One of his best friends, DeMar, gets traded out. He sticks with the squad, doesn't complain at all. He sees a winning opportunity and contributes to winning with Kawhi coming in. I think Kyle Lowry to me is a Hall of Famer. Could I see him not making it? Of course I could see that, but I think it'd be more because they forget rather than he just doesn't have the resume to be in it.
Yeah, I can't make this argument without being biased. I am a massive Kyle Lowry fan, of course. Steph, I might have to come at you again. I don't know how you have an argument that Kyle Lowry's in and Kyrie isn't. When Kyrie was bigger in his finals, neither were very big before the NBA. Kyrie has more All-NBA teams, more All-Star appearances, and probably about the same culture and impact.
He grew the game internationally. I know Kyrie did too. Don't get me wrong.
Kyrie grew the game a lot. Kyrie grew the game a lot, though.
That's very true. That's fair. But big booty Kyle Lowry got it for me.
Yo.
Worldwide, that's what they call him.
I don't know about that. Hey, Mr. Worldwide, that might be his Hall of Fame case alone. His big thing is just going to be his impact in growing Raptors basketball into a real popular brand. It's almost like I might see him as a guy where the Raptors retire his jersey, but I don't know if he gets into the Hall of Fame. And that's just because he does have those All-Star appearances. But once again, the Raptors are a massive fan base. And so when it comes to something like the All-Star game, he's going to be a very popular player, and he's going to be a guy that they want to see there. And especially when you think those Raptors teams, I mean, they were at the top of the East. They're going to deserve All-Star players. But at the end of the day, I don't know if Kyle Lowry was ever a top 15 player in basketball, let alone top 10. He was probably fringe, top 15 at best, and while he did have some great moments, I don't know if his peak as a basketball player was Hall of Fame caliber. I mean, you see only one-time All-NBA, and that's great. Once they went to the finals, he was a big contributor, but what was he, the third option on the team? I mean, Kawhi was obviously your number one, and I feel like Pascal Siakam was a little bit better in that final series. They were both quite good, don't get me wrong, and it's very close, and you could say to make an argument, but when you're not even the clear number two, and also your peak was not as high, I don't know if he was ever a top 5 point guard in the league, when you got to think there was Steph, there was Lillard, there was Kyrie, there was John Wall. There was a lot of guys, even D Rose for like some of that. Westbrook, even again, a deep point guard position, Isaiah Thomas up in Boston. It's like once you start looking at these things, and it's like some of the guys that you might leave out of the Hall of Fame, well, it's a hard argument to make. And I guess I might be making up a little bit extra for my bias and saying, like, I don't know if the resume is all there at just 16-time All-Star and a second, third option on a championship team. It really does just come back to what his culture impact is going to be on Canadian basketball. And that's no doubt huge. But when you're talking all-around basketball Hall of Fame, it almost feels like this is a guy who, like one of you guys said earlier, how Iguodala might be celebrated within the Warriors organization, but not necessarily make the Hall of Fame. While Kyle Lowry is a higher-level player overall, just may not have the same accolades to show for with the Finals MVP, he could easily be a guy that gets celebrated by the Raptors organization, but doesn't get into the Hall of Fame because, let's be honest here, the Raptors don't get as much shine as a lot of the rest of the league, bro. And they're definitely not a very well-looked-upon franchise. And so when you think this guy's very important to the Raptors, but not important to the whole league after a whole, I don't know, man. It's close.
I mean, I feel you on that one. It's hard for me because, like I said, I'll probably backtrack a little bit. Kyrie he'll be a Hall of Famer, just not for his ballot. But it's hard for me to see these guys like Kyle Lowry, Chauncey Billups, Kyrie not. If Chauncey doesn't get in, it's hard for me not to see guys like that get in because they mirror each other very, very, very much. So I guess I should say they're just not for his ballot. They'll get in eventually, but it might take a while. It might be tough sledding. Now, I will say, I think Kyrie would get in before Kyle Lowry gets in. So I will say that much, but I just don't think neither of them are just, shoe-in, for certain they're going into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. When I said that about Kyle Lowry, like them almost forgetting him, what I meant by that was like, it feels like as we talked about how he grew the game internationally, especially in Canada, I don't know how much they're going to value that when talking about the Hall of Fame, like with this Hall of Fame case, which in my opinion is wrong. And like he should obviously be valued because of that fact. But I feel like it's almost going to be not brought up at all. Just seems like one of those things that they just don't even consider, which is rather stupid, but it should be a factor in his Hall of Fame case, and I'm not sure if they will actually factor that in.
Yeah, I mean, we know how the media goes with all things voting. I mean, we see the ballots come in every year, whether it's Hall of Fame, All-Star, or All-NBA, and there's always some questionable decisions, to say the least. So there's no doubt there's always some nitpicking that can be made on what people are or are not considering, especially when it comes to the Hall of Fame. And you talk about something with Lowry where it's outside of the actual on-the-court impact, outside of the U.S., which is the majority of the media, and what people are going to be predominantly thinking of. So there's definitely an argument there that could be something that gets overlooked and doesn't get considered as much as it probably should.
With that said, we do have one more Hall of Fame debate today. And this was me being me at my absolute peak because I chose a player who is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, 23 years old. And I need to ask you guys, if he retired today, is he a Hall of Famer? This is a guy who is very highly talked about, has put up some insane statistics, and already has pretty good accolades, even at such a young age. And I'm going to have to start. I think it's Devin's turn to go first. If he retired today, is Luka Doncic a Hall of Famer?
It's a crazy question, man. It's a sick question. It's a sick question. I'm going to be honest. We're talking about a guy, like you say, is 23. We're 24 now. He is 5 years into his NBA career. This guy is a kid in the NBA in terms of where he's at in his career. He has played 330 games, and we are talking about if he retired today, would he be in the Hall of Fame? Now, despite only the 330 games played in the NBA, what I will give him credit for is he does have a significant international pedigree, which does help his case. We know how good he played before coming over to the NBA and how much he was highly touted because of that. Not as highly touted as he should have been, because international prospects were not given the love they should have been at that point in time, but that's a whole other story for another day. Although he doesn't necessarily have the hardware to back it up at the top level, he's played very well for Slovenia at the international level and has helped them have way more success than they would otherwise, specifically at the Olympics. But in other competitions, he's come out and he's done his thing. But we're still talking about a guy who's only played 330 games in this league, given a guy who has 4 All-NBA nods, all first team, given someone who's been a great playoff riser so far, but he's only got a Western Conference Finals to his name. He's still only got 5 years to his name. And if he's done today, and if I'm looking at this guy who's played less than 350 games in the league, who's never won a ring, who's never made a finals, who doesn't have a finals MVP, who doesn't have any gold medals at an international level, has to be some higher level accolades for me to put a guy with this little in his playing career into the Hall of Fame if his playing career is done as of today. So based on what I have today on the date of recording, which is July 15th of 2023, no. If we're projecting, yes, of course. But today, no.
Yes. He is absolutely a Hall of Famer. There is no question in my mind that man Luka Doncic is a Hall of Famer. I don't care. He could be 4 games into his NBA career. If you have 4 All-NBA first team selections in 5 seasons, are we kidding here? Of course he's a Hall of Famer. 4-time All-Star. He averaged 27 a game last season. Well, also having the previous experience overseas, being the best player for multiple years. Like, if we want to bring up all this stuff about Kevin Love and his college experience, I'm valuing Luka's overseas experience much more than K Love's, and Luka has a better career at this point in his career. He's played 300, a little over 300 games, a little over 300, and he already has this value, this type of career. If we're projecting, he has potential to be top 5 all time if we're projecting. But if we're talking about today, this very moment, he is a first ballot Hall of Famer.
I'm not gonna lie, as crazy as it sounds, it's more of a valid argument than it seems. And the only reason I say that is because I started thinking of some guys that were in the Hall of Fame that you kind of think, why were they in the Hall of Fame? And the first guy that came to mind for me was Bill Walton. And aside from that finals and that finals MVP, you can argue Luka's resume is fairly close. of course, Bill Walton had more accolades like the MVP, all defensive rebounding champion, stuff like that. But Luka had more All-Stars, again, of course, 4 times in 5 years, like Justin said. But his scoring total, his assist total, his triple doubles, like what he brings to his team night in and night out, he instantly changed the Mavericks overnight. It's a valid argument. Now, coming back down to earth, no, he's not a Hall of Famer right now, bro. We're not about to do that. As much as I love to entertain the idea and actually look into some people that
Andre Iguodala is a Hall of Famer, but Luka isn't. I mean, come on.
Bro, Andre Iguodala is a Finals MVP
And
against
Luka is a four-time All-NBA first team.
against arguably the best player of all time.
Against 4 rings, too. You saying 4-time first-team All-NBA against 4 rings.
Where he averaged about 6 minutes a game.
It doesn't matter. He was a integral player to all 4 of those rings. You can say what he averaged, didn't average, but you can't argue with us the fact that he was an integral player to those teams.
I just don't buy it.
You're not buying that he was integral to those championship teams?
No. That's not what I'm saying. I don't buy that Okay, I'm not. Okay, I don't want to argue Iguodala because it's the Luka Doncic thing, but But when
so
we're looking
you're telling me right now, Luka deserves to be a Hall of Famer over Andre Iguodala right now today?
I like literally every single day of the week and twice on Saturdays. Okay.
What the?
That is crazy.
What?
Well, you've argued Andre Iguodala out of the Hall of Fame about 4 times already, and it's a Saturday, so.
The man
4
that
times
was
on Saturday.
The man that was a part of one of the greatest dynasties ever, an integral part that won a Finals MVP during the dynasty run. That guy. That's a. Oh my God. Oh my God.
I didn't even pick Iggy to be in the Hall. That's still crazy. I'm gonna be honest. There's just so much more of a resume and longevity. And the peak,
I'm
like
not
you said,
gonna
like
lie, I
Luka's
don't
been
care
great,
about longevity.
but Luka's got.
Wait,
That's
what?
tough.
I don't care about
That's
longevity to an extent. When you have 4 out of 5 years that are so good, like Luka did, I could care less if tomorrow, I don't want to wish this on a guy, obviously, but if tomorrow his career's over, if he hangs up the sneakers. Give Luka Doncic the Hall of Fame nod.
Hey, real quick. Jelson's cooking, bro. Because if Luka Doncic's career ended today, career stats.
Hold on.
How many guys would average 27, 8.6, and 8? 27, 8, and 8. Even if you're rounding down,
in 5 years,
for
he
their
hasn't even reached his prime.
And in 5 years, and here's my thing: in 5 years, Iggy won 4 rings. So, come on, man,
listen,
what
bro,
are we doing?
I'm
In 5 years, he wasn't even the best player on those years. Like,
I don't care. He had 4 rings in 5 years. You're talking to me about scoring output of what a player did in 5 years.
If you're a bum on a team, I don't care about your championships. Andre Iguodala, well, albeit was a good player.
Was not a bum.
No. What I'm saying,
you just said a Finals MVP.
That's crazy.
No, you're not.
He was a bum for that.
No, you're not. Hear what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, I don't value you just having championships completely as a end.
He had a Finals MVP to go with it.
He had one Finals MVP where he shouldn't have won it. He shouldn't have won it.
That's so subjective. That's subjective. You can't just definitively say he shouldn't have won it.
He has one Finals MVP and nothing else.
Luka doesn't have a Finals appearance.
He has 4 All-NBA. He has and look at his team. His team has not been good enough because of Mark Cuban. But he doesn't know the difference between a rock and a boulder. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
It's crazy too, because I guarantee you though, if we did a community poll on the channel that said, who is better all time, Andre Iguodala or Luka Doncic? I know who would win.
I know who would win, but it's because of the way you're saying the question. It's not because
who's better all time?
No, because people will misconstrue that as Luka's full career, and then they're gonna compare it to what.
No.
You would have to say right now.
No.
We're arguing right now. We're
Right
arguing
now.
if Luka's career ended
Right
today.
now, today, his
Do
stats
you think
and
people
his
listen to it like
accolades.
that? 'Cause
Yeah,
I
I
do.
definitely would.
But
I don't
on our
think there's
Jokic,
a
I feel
way.
like on our Jokic stuff they didn't. Like people
I don't think there's a
when we were talking
way.
about Jokic top 5 and all that, they were like, oh yeah, he's only 28, so he has room to grow. So I understand why he's not ranked that high.
Yeah, but like when you're comparing a guy who's only got 5 years compared to a guy who's been around for like 15, like that, like those aren't going to be looked at the same way. And I don't think there's a way to word that properly in a poll
When
to
my
have people actually consider that properly. That's like only a debate that can be had, not something that you can just ask via a poll. Because
Yeah.
there's no way people just look at Luca's stats and Iggy's stats and be like, okay, Luca's the guy.
okay,
Bro.
so boom,
I got
boom,
them.
he's a
Listen,
Hall
hey,
of Famer.
I got them. I would have them
That's
both as
terrible.
Hall of Famers because Luka's 5-year peak. If we just called it a 5-year peak, right? There's not that many guys that are better, bro. I'm just saying, if you gave me like Luka Doncic or Tracy McGrady all time, I'd probably take Luka, bro. Luka in a guard-heavy league has been
Wait.
top
Is
one,
T-Mac
top.
healthy?
Yes.
No, not what ifs, not what ifs.
No.
Oh,
I'm asking, is
They're-
T-Mac healthy?
I
No,
think
he
he's
was not healthy.
No, I'm asking you. Like you're saying, like what we know of T-Mac, or you're saying T-Mac if he was healthy versus Luka.
What we know of T-Mac.
Okay.
Since
My bad.
like even Luka's one final like conference finals run, like T-Mac's injuries kind of prevented him from even like having that. So, but when it comes to like Luka's peak, I mean, you just got to think career wise. Rounding is you could round if you round up is 28, 9, and 8. Like that's crazy, and it's a 0.6, so that's a bit of a round up. But even 27, 8, and 8 is still like that's LeBron's career accolades, first of all, or not accolades, career stats, mind you. Plus, in the playoffs, his career playoff stats 32.5 points per game on 47-36 splits. That's mad solid, bro. Not to mention he goes up to about 10 rebounds, or actually 9 rebounds, still 8 assists. 32.5, 9, and 8 for your career playoff numbers? I don't know how many guys are matching that. Not to mention, yes, his accolades aren't the biggest, but I believe he was rookie of the year, right? Yeah, he was rookie of the year. And then 4 All-Star
He's a
appearances,
four-time
which isn't the
All-NBA.
most, but 4-time All-NBA, all first team. Here's some guys who haven't made the All-NBA first team 4 times. Bill Russell, Allen Iverson, Steve Nash, Kawhi Leonard, Pistons Isaiah Thomas, Jokic, Dwayne Wade, Russell Westbrook, John Stockton. These are these I feel like these are high-level players.
these
Tell me
are
if they're
some
not high-level
names.
players. Those are some people who have not done what Luka's done at peak-wise. He's been top 2. I've had very large arguments with Devin where Devin has argued to me that Luka Doncic is the best point guard in the league, where point guard is probably the deepest position.
He is the
At
best
that
in the
point-
league.
Okay, so he's the best at his position. How many guys who you can say are top 5 in the league, the best player in the league at their position for a decent sized stretch, at least like 3 years or so? He's been All NBA first team for 4 years. So you could even argue, I mean, I'm not going to say the first year, we'll say he was number 2, just even benefit of the doubt. He's had a good 2 or 3 years as the best player at his position in the league. How many guys have done that and are not in the Hall of Fame?
I just think that with the Hall of Fame player, you need the accolades to match those stats. And the
Overseas.
fact that it's been his first 5 years or so, he still needs the time to be able to bring it all together. There's a couple components to having a Hall of Fame resume. That's the stats, that's the accolades, that's winning, and things of that nature. And I think part of the Hall of Fame status, he's checked off the list of the check mark, but I think there's still parts of his career that has to come together, and that's it. Unfortunately, it comes with longevity regardless. So that's why I just don't have him as a Hall of Fame guy yet. I can't do it.
Just as a quick question, and you don't have to think about it too hard. How long do you think? Like, would you say like Embiid? Do you think that he would be a Hall of Famer if he retired today? Because he's not gone as far in the playoffs, but he does have that MVP. But he doesn't have the first team selections of Luka. So he has a little bit more longevity, but I feel like Luka's accolades outside, I guess the MVP kind of does sway it. But
Well, I honestly would have Luka above Embiid anyway. So I mean, it's not really much of an argument for me personally.
I just wanted to bring this up because we like to focus on the NBA stuff, and he's had a long career when it comes to professional ball in general. We can talk about how he's a EuroLeague champion, a EuroLeague MVP, EuroLeague Final Four MVP, all EuroLeague first team in 2018, two-time EuroLeague Rising Star, EuroLeague 2010 to 2020 All-Decade team.
oh, Steph, this is not looking good for your Mr. Outside the NBA,
Like-
Kevin Love, bro.
Like, there's
Not
no
looking good.
like Eurostar Player of the Year in 2019. There's no question he's a Hall of Famer. No question.
Yeah. See, the only thing that sucks with that is that there's a FIBA Hall of Fame for a reason. They don't quite consider the overseas stuff.
I don't necessarily agree with that because it all goes towards the Basketball Hall of Fame, right? If you're a player that was great in FIBA, but the NBA, or not the NBA, but the Basketball Hall of Fame for whatever reason does not view you as good enough for that, they will go in the FIBA Hall of Fame.
I have one name that's
And
they
you might
definitely
be
do
in both
consider
also,
overseas
but-
stuff. They definitely do consider overseas stuff because Arvydas Sabonis is in the Hall.
Yeah.
Arvydas Sabonis was a dog. We're
Yeah,
not
but
doing
he-
that.
He was never an all-star.
He was not. Yeah, he was.
I don't
He's a
care.
FIBA
Dude was a dog. Arvydas was him.
No. Nah.
Arvydas was him. I don't care.
That's crazy.
That's one of my guys, bro. Arvydas is Jokic before we got Jokic.
Okay, that is kind of funny, but what I will tell you is that they absolutely do value it because it's the Basketball Hall of Fame, as we talked about, and the fact is you could argue he has a Hall of Fame career based strictly off of his NBA accolades, and then you add all of the EuroLeague accolades, and it's like a no.
I love
no.
Luka, bro. I love Luka, but no.
He was on the EuroLeague 2010 to 2020 all decade team.
You guys are.
He
in
was a
denial,
EuroLeague
bro.
I need 3 more
When-
years.
That's
Give me
what's up,
3 more
man.
years minimum.
When Luka
Oh
racks
my
up
God.
6 straight first team All NBAs, and you tell me that he's still not a Hall of Famer, what
It's
that's
just
gonna be some
hating.
crazy discussion.
We-
Did you say 3 years?
We just need a couple more years, bro. That's all.
I mean,
Okay. All right. Listen, there's no convincing you guys. All I'm gonna say is let us know in chat if you watch this after it's posted as a solo video. Let us know down in the comments why Steph and Devin are wrong. I think this was a pretty banger topic, but we will move on. So that is it for today's Hall of Fame debates.
before we do move
Yes.
on, I gotta pop out of here. I appreciate you guys having me on the stream as always, and let me tell you, Gabe, better cook these boys a good show.
Listen, we'll do it. We'll be 3-man weaving, but we'll get to it, man.
All right, I'll see y'all boys later.
Yes,
All
sir.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. So for the next topic, we got a little basketball classic, I think, especially, stuff like Twitter loves this kind of stuff. We've been doing some just player versus player debates. We've done who's better between this guy and this guy. Well, this time we made it a little bit more complicated. We're going to give you a start, bench, cut. And we got 3 of the league's premier forwards up in here, and they all have very different cases. The 3 players we got today is Jimmy Butler, Jayson Tatum, and Kawhi Leonard. Now, if you look at just their peak, and we're talking right now, not all time, but even just the best that they could play right now, I think Kawhi might be the best one here. But then you think, oh, he's pretty injured. And then you think as a talent, well, Jayson Tatum, he might be better than Jimmy Butler, but I just watched Jimmy Butler beat him. I watched Jimmy Butler almost beat him last year, and I watched him beat him in 2020. So when they go head-to-head and match up, he gets the better of him a lot. But the talented player, I can still see you taking him over the other guys. And then Kawhi is such an X factor with what he does. I think this is a very interesting debate, and I'll give my personal take on this last, but I'll start with you, Steph. Give me your start bench cut with Jimmy, Jayson, and Kawhi.
You pretty much hit the nail on the head with pretty much everything, but I kind of went with, both who's more, I guess, talented, but also who you're looking toward building with. So I started Jayson Tatum, benched Kawhi, and I cut Jimmy Butler. Now, I personally, I think this postseason, it puts a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths regarding Jayson Tatum. He did not play very well by any stretch of the imagination, but let's not mistake it. He has an argument as the most talented dude out of these three, and I think going forward that he's going to be a guy that he's arguably can be a top 5 player in this league. You could argue it. Some may even argue it now. I'm not one of those people, but there are some people that I've seen argue that. And I think Jayson Tatum is a guy that this postseason was a one-off, but we've seen him play very well in the postseason, and I think he's gonna get back to that good postseason form that we've seen him at before. With Kawhi, you hit the nail on the head with at his peak, he's probably the best out of all of these players for sure. But injury concerns are a thing, and it seems to start happening around the same time each year, around the most important time that you need him around the year. So there's a postseason concern there, but the reason I'd rather bench him is he's no mistake about it. He's one of the best postseason performers of all time when he does play. And if he's healthy and he's right, I always trust him in the postseason. And that's my most important time to hoop. And I would trust a healthy Kawhi in the postseason more than I trust a healthy Jimmy Butler, because though healthy Jimmy Butler is playoff Jimmy as we know him to be, has been 2 times now that we've seen he hasn't quite finished. Yes, he's played amazingly throughout the playoff push and throughout their playoff run. And to carry an 8th seed to the finals is huge, no doubt. But this is the second time we've seen him get there, but not quite finish. And with Kawhi, I've seen him finish it off. Jayson Tatum, we've seen him actually closer to winning the finals than Jimmy Butler, which is crazy to say. He was 2 games away from it. So let's make no mistake, JT is more skilled. Kawhi is more of a tactical, and Jimmy Butler, to me, he's the very, very hard worker that plays amazingly. Great player, great playoff performer, don't get me wrong, but when it comes to Jayson Tatum and Kawhi being in that conversation, I have to take them over Jimmy Butler. And that's not even a knock on Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, I'm there with you as far as Jimmy's concerned. He was the comfortable guy to cut for me. Like you say, he's had some moments where he's, especially in the postseason, rose to the occasion, but especially from the regular season standpoint, he just does not turn up the same way that Tatum does, the same way that Kawhi does when he's healthy. It's just not at the same level, and he's integral to Miami, integral to their offense, and continues to be great defensively, but he's just not quite there, especially on the offensive end, compared to what you can get night in and night out from guys like Tatum and Kawhi. Who I started between Tatum and Kawhi was definitely a bit more of a debate. I ended up starting Kawhi. And the biggest thing that I could hold against Kawhi to not start him was the injury concerns. But outside of that, I'm taking Kawhi over Jayson Tatum if they're both healthy every day of the week. So I had to go with Kawhi. Like you've mentioned, I was just arguing for him within the last week or two that he is the greatest playoff riser of all time. And he definitely has an argument to be in that conversation. He's done it for the Clippers when healthy. He did it for the Raptors. He did it for the Spurs. He continues to be a very good regular season performer, not quite as good as he once was because he continues to load manage. And even when he does play, you can tell he doesn't turn it up quite as much as he used to, even when to the level he did in Toronto. But he still shows up night in and night out as an elite 2-way player every time he's on the floor. And like I said, the only thing that I could hold back against him was injuries. hell, let me start him if he's injured. Jayson Tatum's on that bench, and he's going to slide right in. So Tatum is my guy coming in off the bench. Great two-way talent in his own right. You mentioned the playoff struggles this year, Steph, but still someone who has a lot of playoff success, someone who continues to create more on the offensive end, continues to put up more numbers statistically on the offensive end. We'll see now moving into this year if those postseason struggles will give him a little bit of encouragement to stop settling for so many of these threes he seems to love. But great player, great two-way talent, continues to improve as a passer and a playmaker, continues to improve, especially over the last couple of years on the defensive end, to being a borderline elite talent on that end. So great talent and a great player to have slide in off the bench when Kawhi inevitably does get injured. But until he does get injured, Jayson Tatum is on my bench.
Man, so you were really choosing that team building aspect. I respect both your guys' picks, but I'm also very glad that even with just three of us here, we are all different. And I don't know if y'all know what that means for how I'm about to go with this.
Are you starting Jimmy?
If this was just based on the playoffs, I would start Jimmy. I view this more as right now in 2023. So I'm more of a what have you done for me lately? Now, I'm not going to say I didn't take in anything in the past because these guys all have recent histories of doing pretty successful things. Kawhi in 2021, Tatum in 2022, Butler 2020 and 2023. So there is still recent success with all these guys, and those are taken into account. Now, would I take into account like Kawhi almost 5 years ago now in Toronto to judge him currently as a Clipper? Would I take him especially in San Antonio? No. Would I take Jimmy Butler as a Bull? No. So not all time, but not just like who played the best in the 2022-2023 season. So a little bit of a balance there. I will say I started Jayson Tatum. This is the kind of commonality here with me and Steph, and nobody cut Tatum. And for me, for Tatum, the reason why I'm starting him, because these are all very talented players, it's his balance of the regular season and the playoffs. Much like Jimmy, Tatum has had some ups and downs in the playoffs. I think there has definitely been times where he has not shown up. I mean, some are early, like 2019, he didn't play good, but he was like a second year in the league. Not great at them. I think it was the year Jaylen Brown was out for the playoffs. Like they fizzled out pretty quick, but he even has some really good games then. And there's definitely a lot more ups there for him. But then at the end of the day, Kawhi load manages heavily in the regular season, and Jimmy Butler is not the same caliber of player in the regular season. So just looking at what you're going to give me for 82, even if Tatum is a little bit worse than those two guys in the playoffs, and this is a guy with a 50-point playoff game on record, and a guy with a clutch 50-point play-in game, I believe. So to say like he can still pull up in those big moments, it's just the fact that Kawhi and Jimmy are such high-level playoff players. But he just has to be the starter because I know he's probably going to give me at least 70 regular season games as well, where Jimmy might give me a lot, but they're not going to be great, and Kawhi's probably giving me like 40 to 50. I'm benching Jimmy Butler. And it just comes down to the fact that Jimmy might not be the best player in the regular season, but Kawhi's not a player in the regular season. He's not there. Half the time he's missing the whole season for something. He's never going to play back-to-back, and he'll probably miss a couple of stretches of this season with some nagging injuries. All that to say, then you're probably going to get to the playoffs, and he's probably not going to be there for you. In 2020, he was there. They choked. In 2021, he played really well. He got hurt halfway through. And since then, he ain't really been that available at all. So when you look at all that, there's a reason why this Clippers team has come up short over and over, and the primary culprit is Kawhi's lack of ability to stay healthy. And if I'm saying, who do I want on my team? Well, as most people well know that watch any content takes I give, I value the playoffs very heavily. And if you're not there, I can't value that. Kawhi, he won my favorite team their only ring, and it was some of the most entertaining basketball I've ever watched. But he's not going to do it again. It's not a what if. It's not an injury risk. It's an injury given. He's not going to be there. And if he is there, you know it's only temporarily. And for that, I have to cut him. When I look at what he's done versus what Jimmy Butler's done recently, the past 4 years, Jimmy Butler led his team to the finals when they were not the best roster in that conference. Year 2, shortest offseason in NBA history. You can hold it against them if you want to, and I don't even blame you. That's an outlier year. They made the playoffs, went out in round 1, pretty sad. I'll even take that as a hit. Come back the next year. Roster is not great. That roster should not have been there. 1 shot away from the finals again against a really good team in Boston. And then this year, once again, they shouldn't have been there. They were the 8 seed. They were 3 minutes away from not even making the playoffs. And he led them to the finals. Now, did some of those role players step up a lot more? Did he have a good coach? Yes. But all of these guys have good coaches. And honestly, all of them have good supporting cast as well. So that's not really an argument I want to hear when it comes to this. Jimmy Butler took them and he led them to that point. Now, after the Knicks series, he got a little banged up, and it did lead to a drop in production from where he was in the first 2 series of this playoffs, and especially things he was doing in 2020 or even late in the 2022 run. But overall, of the recent couple years sample size, what he's given me in the playoffs, not only being available, but the high-level play he's given me is just better than what Kawhi's done. And to add on the fact that he's probably going to play at least 20 more regular season games than Kawhi Leonard is. There's no way that I can possibly take Kawhi Leonard over Jimmy Butler right now, knowing that he's not going to be there.
I love it. I didn't think you were going to take Jayson Tatum as starting. That surprised me. That really surprised me. But I will say I genuinely do like that pick. I like that take. With Jayson Tatum, he just bro needs to incorporate the mid-range game again. That's all he needs, bro. He just needs to get back to being that true 3-level scorer, because I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I agree. And that's when he broke some of his scoring droughts in the postseason. He finally just started getting downhill and getting a few floaters up, getting a few 12-footers up. And, he's done it. We know he can do it. He just has decided not to as of late. So hopefully he gets back to that. But I don't mind your take, Gabe, because I'll be honest, I think cutting Kawhi makes more sense than benching him if you are worried about the injury concerns. Because like you say, you're going to have Jimmy for 20, 30 plus more games than you're going to have Kawhi for. You know you're going to have him in the postseason compared to what you're going to get in Kawhi's case, because you can hope that he's going to be healthy. But like you say, it's more than likely than it is not that it's a given he's going to get that injury at some point in time and end up hurting your team's chances. So if that's your concern and you're worried about the injuries, then why not give me a guy who's still a all-star and borderline all-NBA caliber player, even still during the regular season, and then rises to whatever he does in the postseason and is going to be available. So that's a fair argument, because Kawhi ain't going to be around the whole time. I'm taking Kawhi for what I can get him for, but if you don't want that, then that's completely reasonable.
I just don't like what ifs. He's such a what if with just, I hope he can be there. And at this point, when it's recurring nagging injuries like that, it's like Chris Paul's hamstring, bro. It's a ticking time bomb, and it's going to go off at some point. It's just an inherent thing that's going to happen. He's not going to be healthy. And I can't, if I'm trying to build a team, I like certainty. And I'll say this, I'll take inconsistent basketball play over inconsistent availability any day of the week, because if you're giving me subpar production, you're giving me production. And a Jimmy Butler, regular season Jimmy Butler is better than the bench player on the Clippers who's filling in for Kawhi when he's out,
That's a fair point. I didn't even think about that. That's a very fair point.
Yeah, no, that's kind of why I mentioned, like you say, it's very fair that you want Jimmy over him, just because it's better than nothing for whatever amount of games you're getting nothing from Kawhi. If that's your concern, then you might as well get rid of the guy who you're going to not get anything from for X amount of games every year, and instead take what is still very good production from the other guy.
And I still think above all else, Jayson Tatum is the best player out of all these three right now. So I personally, that's how I feel. I can't speak for all of us, but I think he's the most skilled. But in terms of what you're looking for all 82 and then the postseason included, Jayson Tatum on both ends is a great player.
Yeah, that's kind of what set me off at the end. Like I said, I kind of opened my argument with if it was just playoffs, because when Jimmy rises to the occasion, the best Jimmy Butler game, I'm like blown away, just completely taken aback. Like, this is some of the greatest basketball I've ever seen played. But Jayson Tatum just more consistently, I feel like, gives me a little bit higher of a level. And that's kind of what swung it for me at the end. I will say, to just up the key holder chaos a little bit, and because there's only 3 of us here, so it won't take as long, I'm going to slide one more player in here. Similar position. And I almost put him in here originally, so we're going to make this a start bench trade cut. So we'll just so I have another word in there to rank these 4 players. Mr. Lakers fan, if you slid LeBron James into this, where would he go? Would he be an instant start for you, or would you have to think about it? Because he's been a little banged up over the past couple of years, and Lakers had a good run, but it took him a couple of years to get there, whereas some of the other guys in this list have been towards the top for a little bit more consistently the past couple of years.
You know how you started this off with saying Lakers fan?
Yes.
I'm a Lakers fan, not a LeBron fan, and I'm at that point where I think we're at trade LeBron. So, with that being said, he would, out of the players that we have, he's going to that trade because, for one, I know he's going to give me premium assets no matter what. There's no question about it. Now, it may be difficult for the other team because they know that he's more than likely leaving whenever he has the opportunity to play with Bronny, whenever Bronny comes to the league. But with these other players, I feel like I have a better shot with winning with them because of the fact that with LeBron, you have to have a certain team built around him in order to win. And with Jayson Tatum, he could create his own shot. He is gotten very good at playmaking. He's a pretty good catch and shoot guy. He can play with his back to the basket. Jimmy Butler can do it all, do everything. A lot of these guys are, plug and play, whereas LeBron, you have to have a certain team around him. Love LeBron, and that doesn't go against him all time and his legacy, but I think he's at a point now, and especially with watching Lakers basketball, he's at a point now where I'd much rather have a player that's much more, and I hate using this word because it's overused, but much more portability. I would well actually let me not say that because LeBron can play 1 through 5. I understand that, but in terms of the play style that your team is going to have and the kind of roster that you have to put around your star player in this case, and LeBron, he has to have shooters and a certain roster around him, and if you don't have that roster, it's going to look ugly very quick, and I've already seen it with my team.
Yeah, I can't really disagree with that. I'm probably going ahead and trading Braun as well. I think as of today, I'm taking Kawhi or Tatum as the better player on a team, but I'm probably still taking LeBron over Jimmy. And like you say, you're going to get a ton back for LeBron if you are moving off of him, even at his age, even with his contract situation. You're still getting a lot back for LeBron. And if I'm keeping a Tatum, I'm keeping a Kawhi, like you mentioned. Like, I don't have much to add, but you just have a lot easier of a time fitting a roster around those types of dudes than you do a LeBron. But I don't have an argument to take Jimmy over LeBron. LeBron's still going to get over Jimmy for me, but I'm definitely shipping him out. Kawhi and Tatum are still my guys.
It's crazy because I feel like we all ranked on 3 different criterias and have 3 different orders. But sliding LeBron in, I'm right there with you guys where he is third for me. Because in my criteria where I'm like, okay, this balance of who's going to show up the most in the playoffs and the regular season, LeBron, he's going to be a little bit less available, and he's missed some significant time in the past couple seasons. And even in the playoffs this year, 2 years ago, like, the Lakers got bounced in like 6, and he wasn't like super bad, but he wasn't great by any stretch. And then missed the playoffs in 22. In 23, he couldn't shoot a jump shot to save his life. He could not make a jump shot. And a lot of people will say, well, I think it was like his ankle or foot or something was kind of messed up.
It was his foot, but it was the most ordinary playoff performance from LeBron I've ever seen.
And that's the thing, is he could not shoot a jump shot to save his life. And injury or no injury, like, I don't like it. If he's always banged up, then that's just who he is at that point. I mean, it's once again the Kawhi argument of, when he's healthy, but he's not. He's just not, and he's not really healthy anymore. And with that, if you have that foot injury too, I mean, that's going to affect your defense. And out of the guys here, when he plays, he's probably the worst defender out of these 4 guys. I don't think that's even a hot take to say.
No.
So at that point, it's just the fact that he's probably going to be more available than Kawhi. And I'd almost be closer to, if Kawhi was like 20% more available, LeBron might be getting cut by my criteria. Because I saw Jimmy with a pretty mid-roster lead them to a finals. And I've seen like Tatum lead a team to a finals just a year ago, and they're a conference finals mainstay. I almost feel like the Lakers made the conference finals in spite of LeBron at points. Like, their supporting cast really balled out. And AD was inconsistent for a little bit, but once he really turned it on, like, AD was dang near looking like the best player on that team when you consider his two-way ability. So it's so weird to say because LeBron just had that lock on number 1 player of the league, but I really got to revisit it if I do like a player ranking sometime this offseason. It's like,
I don't know if he's top 10 right now.
I had it, see, because for the past 2-3 years, ever since, because to me, after about 2019, he was no longer number 1. Now, 2020 kind of, it was like that last little gasp, but probably recency bias may have put him back there for a second. But I think especially by like 2021, he kind of fell to a firm like 5 through 7 range for me. But now at this point, I am just like, I don't know if he's top 10 because I know he's not top 5 because I know he's not better than Jokic, Giannis, Curry, Embiid, Luka. Right now, I'm like, I'm saying I'm taking Tatum. I'm saying I'd probably take Damian Lillard over LeBron right now, the way they're playing.
I would.
And now I'm already like 7, and there's some really good players. If
you still got KD.
Got KD, Booker, but I mean,
that's 8, 9.
There's a lot of guys that are very, very good players in this league, and LeBron is still great. And like, he's not like Kobe at the end. All love to Kobe. He was making some of those all-star teams at the end based off popularity. Like, he wasn't the same all-star caliber player anymore. But LeBron, like, even now, saying he has regressed, he's still a very much all-star level player.
Is it
not fringe all-star? He's an all-star, so it's not like.
Is it crazy to maybe say he might not? I don't know. I'm just looking at it, and some players, and I don't know if you consider how integral they are to their team, because, as you said, there was a lot of times Lakers seemed like they're winning in spite of LeBron. Like, there's other players that I could argue, like, I wouldn't say Shea is a better player than LeBron, like better than LeBron, but if you take him out of the Thunder rotation, they're not a play-in team, in my opinion, at least. So, like, I could argue that if we're going by that, at least he's a better player in a sense that for his team, he's much better and much more fit for what they need him to do in terms of winning, because at the end of the day, that's what you're trying to do. So like 10 to 15 might even be.
That's an interesting argument, actually, thinking about where LeBron is now. And honestly, at this point, we're just in a whole different sub conversation. But like I said, there's 3 of us, so I don't even mind too much. Like, we can sort of free will it for a second here. But like looking at that, I mean, this year when the Lakers really started to turn it up, wasn't LeBron out for a lot of that?
It was a lot of AD. It was a lot of AD,
Yeah.
a lot of Austin Reeves.
And so, like, they did win a lot. And it's like, I'm not going to sit here and say that this year he was still in the regular season 29, 8, and 7. Like, that's very impactful and great statistics, especially for year 20. Like, that's good.
Crazy.
That's good. Like, a player in their prime is probably getting in top 5 discussions with that. It's just
he's
the fact
walking
that
into 30. Like, that's just crazy.
Yeah.
He's walking into that. Like, you don't realize he's just barely under a 30-point per game performer.
Yeah, I mean, his scoring the last 2 years has pretty much been the highest that it's been since.
I don't know now. Now it's hard for me to say he's outside of the top 10.
I think statistically, I don't know if I can put 29. So even on like mid defense, it's like, and mid shooting, just
he's
what
shooting
he provides.
50% from the field. I mean, I know 3% is subpar and free throws subpar, but
as a scorer, as a playmaker, as a rebounder, and just as an on-court leader, like he does way too much to, I think, be argued below 10 to 15 range. Like shit, like LeBron, he just has like it's almost like seniority, I guess.
Yeah.
Like LeBron has proven me that he can do so much that even with a bad run, and it's like what people have been saying for years, an off night by LeBron is 80% of players' career day, you know?
Yeah,
so
that is very true.
He can still perform at such a high level.
We talk about this playoff performance being such a bad playoff performance, and for most players, that's a career playoff run. So
I mean, it's very similar stats to Tatum, just less efficient.
He was less efficient than Tatum?
I think from 3, and Tatum wasn't even efficient from 3. But
yeah, I was gonna say that's awful. That's terrible.
LeBron, he was still about. I mean, he was rounding 50% from the field, but we know how LeBron plays. He drives to the rack so much.
Yeah,
yeah, and Tatum was 46% from the field, 32% from 3 in the postseason.
Yeah, much more efficient on jumpers, but LeBron just drives to the rack so much that his field goal percentage is a bit higher.
For sure. I'm excited for this next basketball season, though, man. It's about to be some good hoops.
At this point, I'm excited for player rankings, bro. Like,
yeah, for sure.
I know on 3 Point Weekly, we've done like positional rankings every year, but I'm almost sitting here like, dang, I just want to do that. Like, I need to sit here and make who's the top 10 players in the NBA.
We should do our own top 50. That's
a lot. That had to be a whole dedicated 3-hour stream by itself.
Yeah, that's for sure. But it could be like a special stream, like either I don't want to say day of because people will be watching the games, but I don't know. Yeah, 50 is a lot for all of us, though.
That might even have to be like a week thing.
Yeah,
to be honest, that might have to be a whole week of content.
Yeah.
All right,
we can move off LeBron, though. It's been 1 hour 43 to get into our main topic. I don't think that's too out of the ordinary. And with only 3 of us, I don't think this is going to take too long. So we're going to move on to the top 5 worst draft picks since 2010. So we're not taking you back to black and white basketball, still fairly recent, but a pretty good catalog of draft classes and a pretty good range of time to kind of draw. We look at who's the best a lot of the time, but we're going to look at who's the absolute worst of the last almost decade and a half now, really more than the last decade. So these draft classes, some of them, trash draft classes. Like, there's some that are all-timers, like 2016 draft looking back, I think it looks real good. 2018 looks real good. I like 2011 a lot, but then other ones like 2013, 2015, not so much. So a lot of highs and lows, but some of these worst picks might come out from some places you might not expect. So I guess to just kind of discuss the way we'll do this, each person will give their 5th worst, and then each person will give their 4th worst, and we'll go like that, just so it's not like one person for 10 minutes, one person for 10 minutes like that. I will start off with Devin. I think you're probably good to go to start off something. Who is the 5th worst draft pick since 2010?
This is an interesting one because this is the youngest guy I have on my list and is someone we've talked about on this show in the past as someone that certain people are not willing to give enough time to in terms of development. Now, I will say the reasoning for this being my fifth worst draft pick since 2010 is more so predicated on where he was drafted and what this team then missed out on because they draft him, as opposed to what other things they could have done with the selection. More so than it is the player just hasn't performed well, because this is someone who has struggled to stay healthy, who has struggled to get significant playing time at this point in time in his career. And that player is James Wiseman, someone who struggled to get playing time in Golden State, didn't look great initially in Golden State, was injured in Golden State. I can't be too harsh on James Wiseman, the player, for that being a tough situation to come into, being asked to do things in Golden State that quite simply he just wasn't comfortable with, and was being asked to do things on a contender, which is just not something that most second overall picks are asked to do. Not to mention the fact that, of course, he dealt with a lot of injuries, and he's now looked a lot more promising already in a short stint in Detroit. We'll see what moves forward for him now going in the next year, as he's playing in a very crowded front court. But I'm not grading Wiseman as one of the worst picks in terms of his individual play. Where I am concerned, though, is that this was the number 2 overall pick. LaMelo Ball was selected directly after him. And the Warriors got a golden opportunity in the middle of their dynasty to continue to project themselves forward, either within this dynasty or to prolong their dynasty. And instead, they ended up having to be a piece that gets flipped off to Detroit a few years down the line that essentially nets them nothing. And that is a wasted opportunity from this Golden State organization to flip this piece for a guy who could help the roster, to draft a LaMelo Ball who could have been an absurd sixth man. Would he have developed the same way he would have in Charlotte? That's another debate. But no doubt, so far has been a much better NBA player than James Wiseman. Or they could have drafted LaMelo and they could have flipped him for much better assets than they flipped James Wiseman for, because they just didn't get anything of significance for James Wiseman. It nets them Gary Payton II back onto their team, which is fine because they did need some depth. But that's what they got for a second overall pick in hindsight, is they get Gary Payton II. So from where Golden State could have helped their dynasty prolong or to help their core for the next few years, I think the James Wiseman selection is a rough pick for them in hindsight. His situation coming out of college was a tough one to deal with too. So it was a tough selection at the time, regardless, for a few of those extenuating circumstances. But James Wiseman, the prospect, I'm not giving up on, but for what it meant for the Golden State Warriors and what they missed out on, this is my 5th worst pick since 2010.
My 5th worst pick. This is a guy who, when you look at this draft class and with regards to I'd pretty much say the top 20, about maybe a little bit further, his name sticks out very, very much, because out of all these people, he's probably had the least done in his career. There's a couple guys that have done less, but it's tough. But I have Dante Exum as my number 5, and to be completely honest, in this draft, and this is more of a hindsight, is 2020 kind of thing, every pick before the 41st pick in this draft wasn't a good pick, because that was Jokic. But regardless of that point, because like I said, that is more of a hindsight, is 2020 kind of deal, Dante Exum, he fooled us. He fooled Utah, and maybe not the other teams that didn't pick him, but he was not the player that people expected him to be going forward. He could have been a guy that helped this Utah team, and I understand that Utah they weren't that good of a team during 2014, 2015. They were a below 500 team. Even the year after 2015, 2016, they were still below 500. They didn't become a winning team till the 2016 year. So he wasn't really going to help too much. But when they became a winning team in the 2016 year, that was the year that they actually finished fifth in the Western Conference, and they actually made it to the Western Conference semifinals where they lost to the Warriors. But if you have a guy that maybe is not maybe is better than what he brought to your team, someone that was picked after in the same guard position like a Marcus Smart, Elfrid Payton, Zach LaVine was even picked after him. Those are guys that could help you. And obviously, that was a Warriors team that wasn't going to be beaten. We know what that Warriors team ended up being like today, their dynasty. But regardless, there's plenty of players that were picked after him that would have helped this Utah team and that could have possibly seen this Utah team, even if they did let go of Gordon Hayward, if they still have Donovan Mitchell, it's a possibility that we see a big three of Donovan Mitchell, whomever they picked besides him, like a Zach LaVine and a Rudy Gobert. It's very possible that that's something Utah could have built with, but Dante Exum was their pick, and it was not a good pick, to say the least. He was not a very good basketball player, at least in the States.
Yeah, both of you guys' picks are really close to making my list. Dante Exum was my first honorable mention. Just like really after year one, injuries just kind of ruined his chances of being anything. But even that rookie year, he still wasn't very good. So it's not even like a Jabari Parker where he was looking to be very promising, and then the injuries really just took his legs out from under him and he fell out of the league. Dante Exum really just went from not very good to then not very healthy or very good, and he fell out, which all the guys on my list I feel like are more so just actually bad than injury riddled. So that kind of gave Dante Exum a little bit of sympathy and moved him down to 6. And then even Wiseman, it's a really good point about like, yeah, they could have netted a lot more for him. I honestly feel like that pick wouldn't even be up there as one of the worst for Golden State if they would have just moved off of him earlier, because he wasn't a very big contributor on their title run. And at the same time, even before that title run, there were still rumblings of like, oh, Steph, Clay, and Dre are going to be back. Like the rumors of the Kuminga, Wiseman, Moody packages have been circling around for so long for a lot bigger names than Gary Payton that I think with better management by the front office of their young assets and not trying to have their cake and eat it too, they could have got more out of that. And then you just look at Wiseman on his own, and I think he's still giving you a good 10-6 or so. Yeah, he's 10-6 both this year and for his career. And so while he wasn't very healthy at the beginning, I think he could definitely do better at that in Detroit now, and there's still time, especially with big men, Embiid took a while to get healthy. Even we see guys recently like Chet just missed his whole first year. So I don't think it's over for him. And 10-6 really I don't think would be top 5 worst pick caliber. It's just more the Warriors' mismanagement. And so for what they were trying to do with their franchise, I do think it is a good shout for this list. My number 5 is also quite young. Not as young as a James Wiseman, but a year older, and I have Jarrett Culver here. Jarrett Culver got drafted number 6 overall to the Minnesota Timberwolves. And if you look at 2019, after his pick, there's not really a ton of like great players. Now, there's some solid players here. Kobe White, Rui Hachimura come to mind in the next couple picks. Even if PJ Washington would probably be better. Then getting down later to Tyler Hero, I mean, nobody was going to reach that high for Tyler Hero. So at that point, it's so far gone that it's not something to really hold against them. With that said, they could have really, I don't know, if they would have been able to get a better guy here, even somebody who was just solid, it would have been very helpful than going into trying to compete with Ant and Cat and just knowing the ripple effect. Maybe whoever they could get would be good enough, even if they I don't know, if they could have got a Tyler Hero or somebody. Just he was so bad that he was out of there in 2 years. And then Jarrett Culver in year 3 was basically a nothing piece for the Grizzlies. He was on the roster, but he was nothing close to a key contributor. Wasn't even like a key bench contributor, really. He was just kind of there. I feel like even when he was still in Minnesota, like the shine that he should have been getting went to Josh Okogie for locking up James Harden a couple times. Like, he really just never made anything out of his career. And then last year, he was on a 2-way contract in Atlanta, played 10 games, and now he's probably out of the league. He might get a couple more 2-way shouts, but the fact that he was drafted in 2019 and is already out of the league, a guy like James Wiseman, he's pretty bad. He has not been great. Even a guy like a Killian Haynes that we all trash on all the time, he's still in the league. Jarrett Culver was drafted in 2019 as a top 6 pick and is out of the NBA.
I really like Jarrett Culver coming into the league too. That's what sucks about it. That's what really sucks about it. That he sold me in that NCAA tournament run. But I guess, is it on me to go number 4? Are we gonna rotate it like that?
Yeah, we'll rotate it so you can go 4th and I'll start 3.
So my number 4th guy, I think the point of this kind of is hindsight, honestly. So for what he could be for this team and what he could have helped this team propel to, compared to what I thought another guy that was drafted behind him could have done, it makes his pick sort of bad to me. And that's Phoenix's pick with DeAndre Ayton. It sounds crazy to say because a lot of the guys behind him, it doesn't make sense to pick them number 1 overall, so to speak. But say you go with the same idea that you want a big, because of course they already have Devin Booker during this time. So it doesn't make all the sense in the world to get Luka or Trae Young or someone of that nature. But eliminating the aspect of it being the number 1 overall pick, because I think that makes the gravity of it sound a lot much bigger than what it should be. But you pick a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr., I think he helps this team get over that hump the year they lost to the Bucks. I genuinely do. And his motor does not cool off at times the way DeAndre Ayton's does. And I think a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr. could have been that sole piece that helped them to actually win at this point. And if you look at the Phoenix Suns, they had a very, very quick turnaround. They were a 19-win team in 2018, immediately went to a 34-win team, and then right after that went to a 51-win team. And Monty Williams is excellent when it comes to development. And if you don't think Monty Williams would have had Jaren Jackson Jr. at a championship level at that point, I don't know, because if we remember, Mikal Bridges was traded for on that same draft night, and he developed very quickly and became a very good player very fast. So I think it'd be hard pressed to say that any player that they chose wouldn't have done pretty well, especially with, again, that high motor, or DeAndre Ayton, for lack of better terms, the low motor. I think that is what makes me drive against him the most with regard to that. And like I said, I'm not even looking towards a Trae Young or Luka because, of course, they're guards and Devin Booker was there. But I might even argue Marvin Bagley has a better fit for this team. He has a better fit in general, which could in turn have a better career. Now, it sounds crazy to say because we know who Marvin Bagley is right now, but you never know. It's a possibility. But DeAndre Ayton and that low running motor, I'm not going to be surprised if he's off this team in the next few years. I wouldn't be.
Yeah, your takes. Yeah, your takes on these motors are quite funny. Specifically like our draft that we did, our redraft of 2010, and you not ever taking Hassan Whiteside. Like, you're very consistent with that, hating the low motor. For me, I don't think I could take DeAndre Ayton as one of the worst picks, just because while he might not be what you want him to be, he was still the third best player on a finals team, and I do think that finals run is when he played his best basketball, as well as even early on. Like, he was the second best player on the 8-0 bubble Suns, which small sample size, but they did have immediate improvement upon him getting there. So I can't be that low on him. And if I'm taking a 2018 top pick as one of the worst picks, I'm taking Marvin Bagley. He was my other honorable mention. Him, Wiseman, and Exum kind of clear out that list. So all those guys have been talked about. But when I look at Bagley, I'm like, hey, you were number 2 right before a run of Luka Doncic, Jaren Jackson, and Trae Young. And it's like, Ayton might not be great, but like at least Phoenix got a like high quality starter, like probably a tier below an all-star when he has it going. And so I really feel like Sacramento had the worst pick there, just because next to De'Aaron Fox, any of those guys, like Luka and him, I mean, the two guards might have been kind of a weird fit, but like in the long run, like as great as De'Aaron Fox has even been now, Sacramento was a franchise that was not afraid for a long time to just draft for talent and not draft for fit. And that brings me to my next point, because my number 4 worst pick is Sacramento drafting for talent and not for fit. And that's in 2011 when they drafted Thomas Robinson 5th overall. And he immediately fell out of the league because DeMarcus Cousins was that good. And I don't know how I just segued that like that, but that just shows how Sacramento really just drafted that poorly for that long. Now, Thomas Robinson just never really did anything. 2012 draft, rather. Who was the pick after Thomas Robinson, may you ask? Well, it is a certain guy named Damian Lillard. Now, imagine Damian Lillard knowing the kind of player he is next to DeMarcus Cousins, who was the best center in the NBA during a solid stretch, while Damian Lillard was already an all-star player at that time. So they would have had a really solid duo right there to build around, and it would have made Sacramento probably end this playoff drought a lot earlier than they did, because I'm thinking that like Dame and CJ made the playoffs, and I think Dame and DeMarcus Cousins is better than Dame and CJ. Well, instead they got Thomas Robinson. I don't even think he was there for a full season. He was there for like 50 games, immediately got traded, and then was just on tanking rosters for a little bit so somebody could give him a chance. Almost like something you see, like, I don't even know who'd be a good player comparison for that. But like almost like a Jalil, like what Jahlil Okafor did. I'll say Jahlil Okafor is not on my list, so I'll just mention him. Like, he just only played for like bad teams. So they're like, he might be something, and then he wasn't. So then he just fell out of the league. And it's like they really had an opportunity to build something. Even guys after that, like Harrison Barnes would have been better. I mean, he would have been great. Like Terrence Ross wasn't too far. Like they would have been at least like decent pieces to put there. But like your best player was Chris Middleton. Wasn't Chris Middleton like undrafted?
Nah, he went second round to Detroit.
Oh, second round. I feel like there was a good player in that draft who was like undrafted, but.
Either way, like, that is fair.
Either way, it's a very, very poor pick when they get DeMarcus Cousins, and it's not like DeMarcus Cousins came out of nowhere. Like he was also, if I'm not mistaken, like a top 5 pick. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, the year before.
I think it was 2 years before. I think he was 20
or 2 years, yeah.
So yeah,
right.
So even then, like they knew that he was about to be good, and then they took another big man when they really didn't need to, and it just horrible pick. And I'm glad we talk about Sacramento the way we do now, because those fans deserve it after going through things like this.
Yeah, drafting a guy that high and trading him before his rookie season is even over, just that tells you how bad that pick was in of itself. But I did go a different direction at pick 4. This is where I have another team who me and Gabe especially who've not spoken that well of until recent times over the last few weeks, and that is the Washington Wizards and their draft selection of Jan Vesely in 2011, the 6th overall pick. And he just didn't do anything in the league. He only played 162 games, 140, some of which are with the Wizards. Never really found a role. spent a few years in Washington, bounced over to Denver, and ultimately just proved to be one of who was a lot of guys in this era of the 2010s, who was a guy who was an international prospect, a big international prospect who was teams were tantalized by the length, teams were tantalized by the athleticism, and it just didn't pan out in the NBA. And he's a long list of a lot of guys in the 2010s who were like it. And unfortunately, that he was part of the reason why guys like Luka started to fall in that later part of the 2010s, because those international guys were not respected for a while. And Jan Vesely at 6th overall to Washington was a part of that. That's why he is my 4th worst pick since 2010.
Jan Vesely, man, that I do have to say what I'm gonna say for that one for once, because he will be spoken about in my list. But also, it's my turn to start us off for number 3 here, and I think no surprise, if he doesn't make anybody else's list, I would be a little bit shocked, because he went 4th overall in 2016, and that is Dragan Bender. He came into the league drafted to Phoenix. Devin Booker had a good rookie year, and this was their first chance to get a co-star. And they failed very desperately. Now, they failed again, I believe, the year after with Josh Jackson, so they had back-to-back very bad opportunities at this. But Josh Jackson kind of redeemed himself a little bit more later on. So I had to pick the lesser, or I guess the worst of two, really, and that was Dragan Bender. He first career averaged 5 points per game. He is already out of the league after 4 years. The last year he played was 2019-2020, despite being in the 2016 draft class. And even in that 2020 year, he played 16 total games, and it was like 7 for Milwaukee, it looks like, where he averaged like 3 points. And then he played for Golden State, and we know that year Golden State was so bad they got the 2nd overall pick. So like I said earlier, like a guy who just a tanking team took a flyer on to see if he could be something, he was not something. He did average 9 points in Golden State, which was the highest he averaged anywhere, but very bad team, I hate to use empty stats, but it wasn't. Clearly Golden State knew it wasn't going to be much. Overall, he fell into that craze of almost like you were just talking about with the foreign players where they weren't respected for a while. Dragan Bender, he came right after Kristaps Porzingis really made it. The foreign players look good again. Everybody booed Kristaps Porzingis. He came out, he was good. And they were like, oh, yeah, Dragan Bender, we're going to do it again. And they didn't do it again. He was terrible. So he really fell to that craze and got way overdrafted. And to me, because they could have accelerated that rebuild with Devin Booker, especially with guys like Jamal Murray not too far behind on the board, got to be one of the worst I've seen.
You know, I'm glad you said Dragan Bender, and I was going to choose him. But I'm glad you touched and chose him, because I get to choose the other guy on the opposite end, and that is exactly Josh Jackson.
Phoenix, oh my goodness.
Such an awful pick. And that's why I say it's so crazy to see the turnaround that Phoenix has had, because they've had bad pick after bad pick for a few years. It's kind of crazy to think about. But with Josh Jackson, like you said, they could have had a jump start on that rebuild. People that were picked behind him, De'Aaron Fox is one of them that's huge. Donovan Mitchell, Bam Adebayo. Like, there's some guys that were picked after him that make you like almost sick, because some of these players could actually have helped the Suns very, very quick, especially with the point they were at. Now, of course, the Suns, and I want to say it was like 4 or 5 years after that, they started to become a winning team. But at that point, Josh Jackson was long gone. And with Josh Jackson, he never played on a team that played winning basketball, as far as I can remember.
No, I didn't.
He went from Phoenix to Memphis. Memphis played horrible basketball then to Detroit, horrible basketball. And I want to say, was he in Toronto for a little bit?
No, that was what's his name? The other defensive wing, Stanley Johnson. He went to
Okay.
Josh Jackson went to Sacramento.
Got you. Yeah, he went to Sacramento, but either way, he's never played good basketball. The only thing that he has is all rookie, but he fooled a lot of people after his rookie year, after getting all rookie honors, because ever since then, he never played good basketball. And it sucks because he reminds me a lot of the next guy I have on my list. A lot of the next guy, but I'm
Yeah,
gonna
that's
slide it
a
to you,
good
Devin.
pick. That's a good pick because honestly, I think our duality there is like Dragon's the worst player because Josh Jackson was a career like 11-4, which is definitely better than
Mhm.
Dragon Bender. But like based on you really where you mentioned like who was taken after him, a lot more depth there of like great players in 2017 compared to where 2016 was.
For sure.
Definitely a fair pick. It was definitely a rough couple of years for the Suns in the draft. There's no doubt about it. I do not have a Suns player here, though. I went with a guy that you had earlier on your list, Gabe, and that is Jarrett Culver. I just, like you mentioned earlier, Stephanie, this is a guy that I was really high on coming into the league. And that probably factored a little bit into where I have him on this list because at no point did he look like he had upside to be a positive player in the NBA. Like there was never a point in the NBA. Like there wasn't even really like a 3 or a 5 game stretch where it was like, look, like this is something promising to hold on to. Like there was just nothing for him. He never found his footing. Minnesota pretty much gave up after his rookie season. There was already reports that it's like they're just looking to move off the guy. And they just knew. And that's tough when it's a guy that you're drafting at 6th overall. He played a few games this year with the Hawks, but I mean, he's all but done at this point for where his NBA career stands. Who knows what he'll do potentially internationally and try to work his way back in. But for a guy that was hyped up as high as he was drafted as high as he was, didn't find success where he was drafted, hasn't found success anywhere or even a flash that he could have success. So he had to be on my list for the lack of any amount of potential hope he's given any amount of NBA franchises throughout his career.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but he was bad in the summer league as well, wasn't he?
Yeah,
Because
he
I feel
was.
like I remember that summer league, like the first couple games, he played horrible, and it was like, damn, bro, like this dude might really be really bad.
Hey, I'm not gonna lie. He was cursed the second they played Old Town Road in the locker room at Texas. Bro. Like, bro, they did that. Then DeAndre Hunter whooped that ass in the final, in the championship game, and then Jared Culver was never the same, bro.
He
Never
wasn't the same. It sucks. He was, I don't know, man. And I really thought he was better than DeAndre Hunter. I'm not gonna lie.
I would for real get them confused because I'm such a casual at
Yeah.
college. I'm like, oh, it's the two guys that face each other in the championship. And I'm like, when DeAndre Hunter went first, I'm like, dang, I wonder if Texas Tech beat Virginia if Jared Culver would have went 4 and DeAndre Hunter would have went 6. But man, looking back now, DeAndre Hunter is way better, way better. And I don't even think DeAndre Hunter's lived to the level that people think he could have been. And really, I mean, to say he still could be, but way better than Culver was, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, I think it's kind of,
Who are we on
Devin finished 3, but he is also going to start 2.
I am okay. This is where I had Dragon Bender on my list. He had to be here. He just had to be. There's no way I could put together this list and not have Dragon Bender. One of the worst players that was drafted in the top 5 over the last couple of decades. And like you said, Gabe, was someone that comes in as an international guy when there was a little bit more hope, coming in with the length, seeing if that's a tantalizing partnership to have with Booker, and it just never was at any point. He looked like someone who could have been a freak guy, at least from his frame, but the basketball skills just weren't there. And as we continue to learn more recently, time and time again, just having that size and that height is not enough to make you a quality NBA player, especially as bigs continue to get more and more talented in today's game. And Dragon Bender was definitely an example of that. So he is number 2 on my list.
So number 2 on my list. I think he's up here more so because I was very, very high on him, but also the guy that was drafted just 3 picks after him could have jump-started this team, like, even quicker. But at number 2, I got Justice Winslow. I thought he was going to be so good coming into the NBA, bro. I thought he was going to be I thought he was about to take Miami to places that we saw D Wade take him, and this was just 2 years removed from LeBron leaving the team. So it was like I genuinely thought he was that guy, and it sucks because Devin Booker was drafted just 3 spaces behind him, and you draft Devin Booker to a team that already has Chris Bosh, who we know was dealing with a lot of his calf issues with the blood clots, so he might not have been there, but you still have D Wade to help mentor him. You have Maurice on that team. You have Goran Dragic. Like, there were a couple pieces that could have been moved on this team to help this team be good going forward. And then you add to that, it's Coach Spo helping coach Devin Booker. If you were to draft Devin Booker, that's even better. Like, because for the first couple years of Devin Booker's career, he was playing losing basketball with coaches that were like, at one point he had a coach named Igor or something like that, bro. Like,
I forgot about
so
that.
let's so like thinking about him coming to the Miami Heat with Spo, this Miami Heat team could have very easily been back into the finals a lot sooner than we ended up seeing them there, which I believe ended up being in 2020 against the Lakers.
Yeah, that's real butterfly effect, I feel like, because if they take Devin Booker, like, I don't know what the kind of like timeline of events is up to, now they're back in a year in, year out finals contender somehow, even though they keep seemingly coming out of nowhere once the playoffs start. But, how would they have built around Devin Booker versus just kind of being mid for a little bit and then getting on to Jimmy Butler and Bam and them? So, honestly, since obviously Devin Booker by himself the first couple of years didn't lead a team to winning, a situation where they're like kind of a similar level team for the foreseeable future until Devin Booker really, really breaks out, and it's like they can still get Bam. Devin Booker and Bam is a real solid like two-man duo to really build a team around. So for what it could have meant for them, good shout. I think when it looks Justice Winslow specifically, though, I don't know. Somebody drafted at number 10. Like, it is a lottery pick. But when I'm thinking, like, number 10, like, there's a lot of guys who have been, like, 7 through 9 that have been, like, trash. Like, if I'm saying Justice Winslow, I'm probably saying, like, Frank Ntilikina was 7 or, like, something like that, and he was bad, So once you start getting past, like, to me, 6, because that's really the highest drafted player I have on my list, or lowest, I guess, whatever you want to call it. But like the latest pick I have in the draft, I think on mine is just like 6, because after that I do feel like there's a lot of guys who fall out pretty quickly. You give a very good argument though. My number 2, however, has already been mentioned, and I did note that I would bring him up again later. Dude, Jan Vesely was horrible. he was horrible. This guy is bad. When we were doing our we did a 2010 redraft on here like a week ago. Maybe not even. And my guy Reek was in chat, and he kept saying like random names. And one of the names he said was Jan Vesely. And remind you, I'm 20 years old, so this draft happened when I was like maybe 10. No, I was 8. Yeah, I was 8. So, like, I'm like, who is that guy? Like, I don't even know who that is. I go and look at this dude, and this is what I see. I get on his basketball reference page. Drafted 6th overall. John Wall could have used a co-star here. I believe they're still a year out from Bradley Beal, but we know young players usually don't make a team take that much of a leap immediately. So whoever they got, I'm sure they wouldn't have got that much better to get out of like a Bradley Beal range. So not to say that would have completely prevented them from getting him, but even if it did, maybe they don't give him $50 million in a no trade clause. So, I don't know. But anyways, Jan Vesely career points, 3.6 points per game, 3.5 rebounds per game. 3-3 as a number 6 overall pick. How long did his career last? Okay, he played his first season in Washington. He played his second season in Washington. Year 3, he played 30 games there, got traded to Denver, played 20 games in Denver, and was out of the league. He wasn't good on his first team, terrible on his first team even. Traded for basically nothing during year 3 and immediately fell out of the league. No team even gave him so much as a flyer. No two-way deal. No, hey, we're really bad and we'll sign you and see if you can be something. Even like earlier when I was talking about Thomas Robinson, he was bad and he got traded immediately. But like at least he got traded immediately because they had DeMarcus Cousins at center. And it's like, okay, like we don't really need you for a position. And maybe somebody else wanted him. That's the biggest thing. Somebody else traded for him. Whether they gave up much, that's to be said. They didn't, obviously. But, like, Jan Vesely just was nothing. He just was not an NBA player. And he was drafted 6th overall in a good draft class. Let's go back to 2011 draft. You know who else was drafted in 2011? Kawhi Leonard. You know who else was drafted in 2011? Klay Thompson. Let's look at some of the picks that were right after Jan Vesely. First couple after, Bismack Biyombo, Brandon Knight. Not great, but Bismack he's been in the league for a while, so like way better pick than Jan Vesely. Even Brandon Knight, had some solid moments. After that, you got Kemba Walker, Jimmer Fredette, who fell out of the league, but then Klay Thompson. It's like, dude, they could have got Kemba Walker there. Kemba Walker was great in college. You're telling me if somebody takes Kemba Walker at 6, I know they had John Wall, but at that point, just draft for talent and trade him down the road. That's better than what happened with Jan Vesely. And I'm not going to sit here and say, like, oh, they should have taken Kawhi or, like, Vucevic or something or Tobias Harris because, you know, those guys weren't in the same range. But Jan Vesely is horrible, bro. He is horrible.
Is it on me for number 1?
Okay, well, all right. So we're at number 1. We all have the same guy, right?
I think so.
2013.
Yeah.
Anthony Bennett.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But I just want to say the biggest reason, not biggest reason, but something that people don't think about with the Anthony Bennett pick, LeBron came the year right after. So this really could have potentially helped the Cavaliers win more than one ring and actually compete with the Warriors going forward. Like you go get a guy like Giannis, but let's not tell you about Giannis because we know Giannis was a project kind of guy. We know he had to get to where he is, but you get CJ McCollum. I think LeBron is playing very well with a guy like CJ, maybe even Victor Oladipo. There's guys in this draft, though it's not a super, super deep draft. You don't waste your pick on Anthony Bennett. There's a few players in here that could have helped you at the very least compete against the Warriors.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie to you, bro. Like, LeBron's probably coming regardless, so I think that is a good point of like I keep saying, if you draft a better player here, this player as a rookie is not making your team that much substantially better. And if I'm not mistaken, they did have to jump a little bit to get the Andrew Wiggins pick, right? Like they weren't the worst team in the NBA, were they?
Yeah, they weren't.
I didn't think so. And so at that point, it's like, well, they still weren't going to be a playoff team, so they still have lower draft lottery chances, and I don't even think that prevents them from getting Andrew Wiggins. So to think they just have more assets to trade to build around what you have in LeBron, because that guy's probably not staying long term. Like Kyrie, he was already like all-star at that point, but the rest of their young core, like how the Kevin Love deal happened, maybe they get another guy, or maybe, I don't know, maybe they get somebody better than Kevin Love, and that's crazy to say because Kevin Love was damn good in Minnesota. So the thing with Anthony Bennett, that draft is trash. Like CJ, like you're talking about getting CJ McCollum. Like, CJ McCollum was 10th overall, and I know they went into this draft without a consensus number 1, but like Victor Oladipo had
Anthony
upside,
Bennett as
and
the number one is
he
crazy.
became like Victor Oladipo became an all-star. Otto Porter was up, like he was real dang solid role player, like valuable starter in Washington.
The thing with
Yeah.
this draft too is like there was not a consensus number one, and even though that was the case, Bennett was not one of the guys who was considered a favorite to go number one by most. So like it wasn't even a consensus favorited pick, and he had injury concerns coming out of the back half of his college career. Now there was a few guys like that in this draft class, Nerlens Noel being another one, but like he was not a consensus pick, and for some reason they bought in. And if you go off the board and it hits, it's great. But when you go off the board and it's this bad, it's rough. It's really rough. And like you say, the timing with LeBron pulling up makes it even worse.
Right. And, at the end of the day, like looking at my whole list, there's reasons why to me, like guys like Bagley and Wiseman, like they were bad picks, but they're NBA players. They've been around for a while. Like, and Dante Exum, he was very injured. And then even looking at a pick like a Justice Winslow, like he was an NBA player. A lot of these guys are still NBA players, even if they are massive busts. Anthony Bennett and pretty much all five guys I put here were not NBA players drafted in the top 6. And Anthony Bennett just takes the cake because he wasn't an NBA player drafted at number 1. He's a career 4-3. You got 4-3 out of a number 1 pick. Like, that's crazy. There's been like Jan Vesley, 3.5 and 3.5, but at least he was number 6. Jarrett Culver, he wasn't an NBA player, but he was number 6. Like, these guys were not top 5 picks. Even Thomas Robinson, 5-5, so like a little bit better stats, but like Sacramento is a terrible front office, and I don't even know, man. Like, these are all not NBA players, but my list is like 5 was a 6th overall pick in Jarrett Culver. Thomas Robinson was a 5th overall pick. Dragon Bender was a 4th overall pick. Jan Vesley was back to 6, but he's just that bad. And Anthony Bennett was a 1st overall pick. So it's like, for me, if you're not a real NBA player, the higher you're drafted, the worse it gets.
Yeah, and even though he was the 1st overall pick, even regardless of production, teams knew he wasn't going to be that guy pretty quick in the league, because the only guys we mentioned tonight on our list who played less games than him is James Wiseman, who's still just getting into the league, and Jarrett Culver, who's the other most recent draft pick. Everyone else, including Jan Vesley, including Dragon Bender, Josh Jackson, they've all played more games and got more run than Anthony Bennett did.
So that pick was so disgusting, bro.
It makes lists like this so boring. It's like,
and there's no way
2 through 5 is so fun. Like, we don't know who everybody's about to say. Then we get to number 1, and it's like Anthony Bennett.
This man really
been shocked. He had to have been shocked when he got the phone call. There's no way.
Had to be. Like this guy really shot 30% in his 19 games with the Raptors.
I need to know they need to release his workout footage. I need to see that.
This man must have had the workout of his life for the Cavs.
God.
Like, there's just no way.
Devin, I'm not gonna lie to you, bro. This dude set Canada back years, bro. And I know Canada had a number 1 pick really the year after, but hey, Wiggins caused some allegations for a long time until he went to the Warriors.
Yeah, Wiggins did have some bust allegations for a while, bro.
Anthony Bennett set Canada back years, my God.
Yeah, he really did. Thank God SGA came around and Jamal Murray came around, but man, it was rough for a few years before Wiggins finally started doing his thing in Golden State.
All right.
I'm surprised no one had Ben Simmons on here.
No, Ben Simmons was an all-star.
Of course, but even still, like, wouldn't you be expecting that number 1 overall pick to especially the kind of guy he was during his all-star years, wouldn't you expect him to still be at that level now,
Yeah, but with that peak, like, I don't know. I'll get a guy who's an all-star for, like, Ben Simmons probably only has, like, 1 less all-star appearance than, like, D-Rose, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I'm not going to sit here and call D-Rose a bust. He was an MVP, and he was better than Ben Simmons, of course. I don't want to try to, like, make that comparison. But at the end of the day, like, Ben Simmons is an NBA player, and even if he stepped on a basketball court right now, we'd grill him for being way worse than he was in Philadelphia and regressing crazily. But I still think Ben Simmons could be on a basketball court and provide you something. Even if it's just some defense and playmaking, he could provide you something at an NBA level. He's an NBA player. These guys are not NBA players. So even at number one, even kind of like what I was saying with DeAndre Ayton, he might not be what you expected him to be, but like at least he's an NBA player at the end of the day. And Ben Simmons was a damn good one for a little bit too. Philadelphia had a chance to compete with Ben Simmons as one of their top players. I feel like I say it every week that 2019 Philadelphia was nice.
They were cold. They were. That's valid. So, what are we moving on to, Mr. Keyholder? Are we doing the game because it's only two of us?
Hey, with that said, before I move on, let us know who your second worst pick of all time is, because we all know number one's Anthony Bennett. Whether that's down in chat, whether that's down in the comments, be sure to tell us. Or if you think that Anthony Bennett wasn't the worst, let us know why you're wrong.
Yeah.
With that said, though, I am a man of the people. I'm the people's key holder. So I'm going to leave it up to you guys, because this is going to be for the number one pick. If we do play, it's going to be for the number one pick in the next draft. So if you guys are going to be around on Monday, then your reward for being here will be the number one pick next time. So do you guys want to play for that and for key holder privileges? I could save the game again, or even I could just host it both times so we could play again. You guys can get some practice reps in, man. I'm just saying. See how the game works. Give yourself an advantage if we decide to play it again Monday.
I don't mind some reps, and you do know, Gabe, I am notorious for loving to have a later pick in a draft. So I'm not opposed to not having it be for the number one overall pick. I'm gonna be honest.
Same, but also like I've gotten key holders, so I don't have the same kind of motivation to like.
Yeah, no, I feel you.
All right,
but also like I genuinely feel like what makes the mini games that much more fun is having everyone here. You feel me?
Yeah, I agree.
And I think it would make it better for you as the key holder too, just from being the key holder perspective. I think that would be dope.
I agree. For me, it was just going to be seeing if the game flows well, because I did just kind of make it up. But as long as the game makes sense to everybody, we can definitely save it. We can hop off here a little early. We've had a good, nice 2.5 hour stream. Definitely got some good engagement here, bro. Got some solid engagement on this here stream. This stream, we're up to like 11 likes on here, man. That's pretty decent for a Saturday night, man. People tuning in. They could be out at bars, but they're watching Kia threes.
That's what we love.
You real for that?
Hey, we good to wrap it up then?
Let's wrap it up then.
Good.
All right then. Well, if you're still here in chat, let us know. What was your favorite part of the stream? Once again, who was the worst picks of all time or just in the last 10 years? If you want to talk about how bad Michael Olawokandi was, we will listen to you, because that is the engagement. So be sure to like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. I know most of the people that are here this late are usually mainstays, but just in case anybody sees this on the fly, if somebody watches it in retrospect in the future, go down there and sub. We're building something crazy here. 170 subs today. We hope to be at 200 very soon and only up and continue to grow from there. I guess if we're not deciding a new key holder, I get to run it back on Monday. So with that said, the people's key holder will return very soon. But until then, we wish you the best, and we will see you next time here at Key of Threes.